guys going to speak from here, you think? Just sit someplace else.
No, I think we're good.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I will go ahead and call to order the Town of Essex Select Board meeting for Monday, June 16th.
I still don't see it.
The first item on the agenda is additions or changes. Are there any additions or changes from the board? Any from staff?
No agenda changes from staff. We did give you an updated memo to go with item 7K, the appointment of boards, committees, and commissions. We just had a few typos about the number of seats that were open and the terms, so we can speak to that when we get there. But just wanted you to have the correct information in front of you.
Okay, no additions or changes, no need to approve the agenda, which brings us to public to be heard. Public to be heard is a time for members of the public to address the select board for items that are on the consent agenda but not on the agenda. Items that are on the actual agenda, we will save time for public comment during those items. So if you are in the room and you wish to speak, you can raise your physical hand. If you are online, there is a react in the lower center of your screen. From there, you'll have the option to raise your hand. I do see that we have multiple folks online. I think Betsy Dunn was the first. So Betsy, go ahead. If you're speaking, you're muted.
All right, now I can speak. Okay, I have a very big concern on, you have in the consent agenda, letter C, a statement about consent approval, consider approval of additional wastewater allocation for 56 Tanglewood Drive. Bruce and I have sent in a request for reconsideration. There are significant problems with what happened at the DRB. We were told in the bylaws, there were reasons why they could not have more than an ADU and just in that one area. And this is incorrect. The actual statement is that uses of lots and improvements subject to and shall comply with all laws, orders, and regulations which may in time to time be applicable, including without limitation, the zoning ordinance of the town of Essex. The first thing they say is no lot shall be further subdivided after execution and recording of thereof. Only one home may be located on each lot. What they've done is they subdivided their lot, which is against the rules of the general design restrictions, but section 5.1, letter B. We should not be discussing this wastewater approval because it's ahead of time. They may decide not to comply or give them the right to subdivide and have an ADU on that property. Any questions? Hello?
Many questions, not, I'm not sure that public to be heard is the time to get into questions and back
But
and forth on
But
this.
Tracy, the consent agenda, you don't take comment. It just gets voted on.
Which is going to be my next question to the board.
So I think maybe it should be
Public
pulled
to be
out of
heard.
the agenda.
Betsy, can I finish, please?
Sure.
During public to be heard, I don't think that we should be getting into a back and forth conversation. So my next question to the board would be after public to be heard, was whether it would be appropriate to gather more information, i.e. amend the agenda until we can get more information, because I don't think, like, right now is the first time I'm hearing about this. So I would like to learn more. But I'm not going to take up any more time right now during public to be heard, because this is the public's time. So I want the public to have your time to speak and address the board. But that will be my next question to the board.
Can I say, I would like you to consider to pull that from the consent agenda and table it for after the DRB meeting on the 26th.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
I believe Bruce Post, you were next.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me and everything?
Yes.
Great. I just want to add my voice to Betsy. I'll give you just a quick summary. At the DRB meeting, when this was approved, a good part of the discussion was whether other buildings could be added there. The zoning administrator said the bylaws would prevent other buildings being put on this lot. No accessory dwellings, no mother-in-law apartments. I went and looked, as Betsy said, the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the extensions of Tanglewood Drive and Rosewood Trail, and it stipulates lots cannot be subdivided, that accessory units could be put on there, but they're restricted to offices, and that mother-in-law apartments could be added. Plus, there have been 2 amendments subsequent to that. So Sharon said maybe this is something for a lawyer to consider. These bylaws were not presented in the staff report. The DRB had many questions about them, and I think acted hastily, and more work needs to be done, particularly through legal counsel. Thank you.
Lorraine?
Thank you, Chair. Just an overview. I'm frustrated by some of our public comment, well, not public comments, our comments relevant to site planning ahead of time, because the agenda gets posted Friday morning. I work during the day, and sometimes there's something on the packet that's been added, and sometimes something's amended later, even at the meeting, and I don't have time then to add a letter that could be, if I can't make the meeting, that is relevant to the actual meeting. Is there any way to have the agendas, and I think this has been brought up a number of different times, the agendas 2 weeks in advance as opposed to 1 week in advance, and to change that policy that you can add public comment up to 1 week before the meeting or something like that. And the other thing that's difficult too is on some of the site planning plans, that's on a separate page, and they're named with names, like for the Amazon one, it's named Scannell. And if people don't realize that is what the name is, I was wondering if there's a way to add more relevant search names to that particular page for the site plan, and also if that could be linked back to the agenda page during the meetings. And also, like next door, there's an amendment to the site plan, and it was supposed to be scheduled for the last DRB meeting. It didn't end up happening with the agenda. The Mylar, when I last checked, had the old date on it. So now I have to pay attention to when I have to add stuff and send stuff in again, and make sure I have enough time before the policy cutoff date now of Friday. So it's making it very difficult to make sure the public can be heard. I think Milton does up to a month in advance. So might be worth the staff certainly looking at local municipalities and how they handle it to make it easier, because I think in the long run, the more public comment you have up front, the less fighting and anger you have in the back end. And I know it could be a pain in the butt, but it just, to me, in the long run, it's easier to find out the problems ahead of time than it is at the meeting or later. And I think certainly would help smooth things out and make work more efficient. Thanks.
Lorraine. Any other public comment? Anyone in the room? Yes, come forward.
Yes, I do now. So my name is Jeff Kirshner. I'm the engineer that represented the McClellans on their DRB review. And I would just ask the select board to take note of what we're here for tonight. We're here to ask for a wastewater allocation of 1 EU for that parcel, for that project that has been approved by the DRB. I understand there's some question about that approval, but that is with the DRB and the DRB's approval. This is a whole separate piece of that puzzle. So I would just ask that you take kind of note of that we're here for an EU, not anything to do with that subdivision and that subdivision approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Betsy, is that a leftover hand?
Oh, well, no, it's a current hand. And I just want to let you know that the members of the DRB, notably Dusty, was very, very upset that these papers were not included with their packet. So they didn't have this information either. So I think that it bears good conscience in going back and relooking at that just to make sure everything is copacetic. I really believe it, because this is wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. All right, with that, I will bring it back to the board to be heard. Prior to starting our public hearing, I'll ask if any board members would like to amend the agenda. I don't want to lead anybody to anything, so that's my only question. Andy?
Yeah, I would like to make the motion that we move the consent item 6C to a business item and have a discussion about it this evening.
Okay. Is putting it in J and pushing the others down, is that acceptable?
Sure.
Okay. Ethan? Okay. We
You
have
don't need a second for that, do you? You don't need a second for that, do you?
Yeah, I made a
to
motion
amend the
to
agenda.
amend the
We need a
agenda.
motion. We did a second.
Oh, okay. I thought if you say anything about a consent item, it's
No, we still have to vote on it.
Yep, still have to vote on it. So moving consent 6C to 7J, moving J, K, L, and M down one letter. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. With that, we will, Ethan, did you have something?
Oh, I didn't know if we needed to approve the
The rest of the,
Oh,
consent.
yeah.
Move we approve consent.
We're not on consent yet,
Sorry.
but you've always been confused, because if we amend the agenda, do we then have to approve the amended agenda, or is that assumed? But just to be safe, I would
yes.
accept a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So
Thank you, Ethan.
Second.
Thank you, Shannon.
We did that.
Well, we amended it, but we
oh,
haven't
we amended
approved the amended agenda,
Yeah, yeah,
so to be safe, let's go ahead and do that.
Yes, yes, yes.
You
All those
wanna
in
go
favor of
down because
approving
this
the
is
amended
the
agenda,
last
please
one.
signify by saying aye.
On the
Aye,
business
opposed, nay.
item.
We have an approved amended agenda. Thank you.
Okay.
With that, we'll move on to our public hearing on the impact fee ordinance amendments. Chief Cole.
Use a long microphone. Good evening.
Good evening.
We are here tonight for your consideration for the approval of both the impact fee ordinance and the schedule that goes along with it. I know that you have a final draft of the ordinance language as well as two memorandums that Deputy Manager Adams has submitted on the 12th and the 13th for your review. And we are, not just me, but we are ready to accept questions or clarify anything for you that you may still have concerns about.
Any questions from the board? Not seeing any, but do we need a motion to open the public hearing?
Can't hurt.
Thanks. Andy?
I move that we open the public hearing to discuss the fire impact fees.
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Shannon. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Public hearing is open. And with that, I will turn it over to members of the public who have questions, clarifications, curiosities on this proposed impact fee ordinance. do not see any hands, virtual or otherwise. I'll bring it back to the board. Are there,
I just wanted to make sure, I guess to give a real quick overview in case anybody is seeing this for the first time, and for the record, these proposed changes to the town's impact fee ordinance. These changes are based in large part on a fire impact fee study that was conducted by the fire department and consultant John Slayson over the past year. It would also have an impact on our existing recreation impact fees. Just the wording of that. You'll also be asked later on tonight to take a look at the impact fee schedule that would accompany the ordinance. That is separate from the ordinance. It's a separate action. But the language tonight is to take a look at authorizing you to collect impact fees on fire and on recreation, as well as any others that may come up in the future. We did get input from the Economic Development Commission and the Housing Commission. That information is in your packets. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to see that. That is some public input that's not being spoken tonight, but that you had not seen beforehand. And I think that's it, unless anything else that's worth mentioning.
Well said.
Thank you.
and understanding that we have seen this multiple times before, but some members of the public may be seeing it for the first time. Thank you for that context and taking the time to give that background. So with that, I'll ask again if anyone has any public comment for the public hearing on the proposed impact fee ordinance. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Ethan.
Move we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a
Second.
second? Thank you, Andy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Public hearing is now closed. Thank you, and we'll see you again in a little bit.
Thank you.
Ethan.
Make a motion we approve the consent.
Thank- Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Shannon. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to our first business item, interview a volunteer to serve on the Energy Committee. Do we have Will here?
Don't see him.
Don't see Will, so if there's no objection, I will move forward to B, Energy Committee, Rod Williams. Come on up. Good evening. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Certainly. My name's Rod Williams. I'm quite relatively new here, moved in January. I am an attorney. I am currently with the Vermont Attorney General's office. I came here from Virginia after serving in local government for about 20 years, including the previous 16 as the county attorney in Frederick County, Virginia, which is, if you've heard of Winchester, Virginia, at the very top of Interstate 81, at the pointy part at the top of Virginia, that's where it is. So it's always fascinating to come to a local government meeting and see how it works, and a lot of it looks very familiar. And I'm having parliamentary procedure flashbacks on a couple of your things. Anyway, I want to get involved in the local community. And energy's of an interest as well as something I have some background in. I understand it looks like the committee focuses perhaps more so on the town's own energy plans and usage, but also just in terms of, in general, for usage of energy in the community. When I was in my last job, I ended up actually in the unusual situation of learning more about energy, particularly electricity, than the average bear, so to speak. One of the transactions I ended up being involved in from the regulatory side was our county was at the time served by an investor-owned utility providing electricity service, and they sold or sought to sell their territory to 2 electric co-ops. So I ended up on behalf of the county and its constituents involved in a regulatory proceeding for the approval of that, and it was a fascinating learning experience, and it ended up before what was Virginia's equivalent, in essence, of a public service commission. And when it was all over, I had one of the commissioners tell me, you probably just went through a once in a lifetime experience for a local attorney on something like this. But so I know about generation issues. I know about transmission issues. I know about some rate issues. And like I said, it's an area of general interest to me because obviously energy's a key issue that all communities face. Obviously, this community is no different, and the nation at large and the world at large. So I'd love to serve, and I'm certainly more than willing to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Turn it over to board questions.
Thank you so much for volunteering and putting your name out there. Have you attended any of the Energy Committee's meetings?
I have not yet.
Okay. Well, I was going to say Will's here, but he's not here. But I'm sure he could give you an overview of what the committee does. All the minutes and recordings are online as well. What is your vision when you think of Essex? What are we, having been coming from afar, what do you foresee for our community?
Well, I can start. I'm going to start by saying it's a lovely place. I've truly enjoyed being here. I think more of the same. It's a very homey place. It's a very welcoming place. It certainly seems to be doing a good job providing facilities for its constituents. It's very interesting. Where I came from, we had probably 8 or 9 times the population, and I think there's more park space here and sidewalks here in a few square miles than there were in many times more square miles and for many times more people. And a desire to provide those services. I've seen the plan for the proposed new town development government facility. Looks like a wonderful thing. I realize it's very ambitious, but I think things like that and continuing to develop those public facilities and doing them in a sustainable way is a good vision for the future.
Thank you.
Andy?
So one of the best things that Rod has experienced is he's my next door neighbor.
He did not put me up to it.
So given that, I'm disclosing that because you are my next door neighbor, and I don't foresee that that fact causes me to have any concerns about a conflict of interest. So I'm going to continue to participate in the interview here and also potentially discussion later. Rod, the question I always ask volunteers is, what does it mean to you to be a public servant?
Having spent a good deal of my professional career on that, it's a good question, and I think I have a good answer. It means to think about the public interest first, to think about the greater good of the community, what's best for the community, what type of community a community needs to be, and not to have really any expectation of anybody feeling that they need to recognize what you've done. You're doing it because you care about the community, and it also means being willing to take the criticism. Sometimes public servants have to make difficult decisions, even in an advisory role, in terms of expressing opinions. And I think one of the very important parts of public service is making sure that we all do feel free to express our opinions, and obviously without fear of retribution, but also being willing to be accountable for those decisions and recognize that not everybody's going to agree, but try to find a common ground, and do what's best. And again, sometimes what's best isn't always what's most popular. But the greater good in the long run is, especially on something like energy, which is obviously a very long-term focused thing, is what matters the most.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ethan?
You kind of just touched on my question a little bit, but I was gonna ask if you know, in a board setting, if you were the minority on a subject that you're really passionate about, how would you handle that?
Express my opinion, try some gentle persuasion, but obviously civility is civility is very important to public discourse, and sadly, as we've seen in recent years, it's sadly lacking. But which is why, again, gentle persuasion. Try to make the intellectual force of one's opinions stand up, but at the end of the day, you take a vote, and whichever side you're on is whichever side you're on, and you walk away and feel that you've done your due, taken put forward the best view that you could. And if you're on the losing end, you're on the losing end. And it's not about being jealous about it. It's not about then later saying, I told you so. And it's not about, disliking somebody. Hopefully, and I've gone through this to some degree as a lawyer, done some trial work. At the end of the day, you still want to be able to go over to the other side and shake hands and, who knows, maybe you'll go have a drink afterwards and say, hey, good job. I know we disagree, but we're all in this together. And, I'm going to support whatever's best for us going forward for us to be one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kendall?
I noticed in your application it says you're interested in, I assume, energy conservation issues and the current issues facing here. Could you expand on what you think those might be and how you would apply that in your new position?
I mean, obviously, I need to learn more about what some of the greatest concerns and needs are, but obviously, energy is there. There's always areas, I'm sure, where improvement can be had. Technology is changing greatly. I mean, just as recently as within the last 10 and 20 years, we've gone through, just a little thing like, the way light bulbs have changed. Current light bulb technology uses about less than 20% of the electricity that old light bulb technology used. So always looking for those technological advances that are possible, recognizing that sometimes upfront investments in better technology that will save over the long run is useful. Not necessarily always putting off deferred maintenance on items. My family, we owned a house 2 houses ago, and we bought it, and it had this was in Virginia with a heat pump system that was this particular unit was dying, and we ended up spending $5,000 or $10,000 on a new unit, and our electricity bills fell by like 2/3. The thing paid for itself within a couple of years. Now, we could have very easily said, well, we can't pay this $5,000 or $10,000. The system works. Let's keep using it. It was a good investment in the long run. And those are the things that, we need to look for to say, let's not defer spending something that's going to save us in upcoming years. As far as some of the specific, technological things, again, I have to learn more, but look forward to it.
Great, thank you.
And Rod, my only question is, do you have any questions for us?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for applying. And as you may have noticed on the agenda later this evening, we will be considering appointments.
Okay.
So if you would like to stay, you're more than welcome to stay. If you choose to head out, someone will be in touch.
Okay, thank you very much. I may head out because I do have an errand to run,
Okay.
but thank you so much for considering.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep.
I do note that Will has joined us online, so I'm going to hop backwards to interview a volunteer to serve on the Energy Committee with Mr. Will Dodge. Will,
Hello,
go
all.
ahead.
Sorry, I'm joining a little late.
You're good. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Yes, so I joined the Energy Committee in 2017 out of a sense that I wasn't really doing much for my town and felt a need to, and was also concerned about issues pertaining to climate change, and thought that there were a lot of opportunities in Essex for renewable energy development. And ever since then, I've had the privilege of kind of serving as the chair. I came on and there was nobody on the energy committee really, except for Irene Renner, and she very helpfully guided me to sort of take it over and try to reformulate it. And then I've had the great fortune of having some really wonderful people that I've worked with, maybe foremost among them, Natalie Braun. Also, and really the current membership is great. The reason that I am choosing to renew my membership, even though, or my tenure, I guess, is that there's still a lot of unfinished business that I would like to do. Foremost among those would be the charter change, but also looking to continue the tradition that we started of doing kind of sort of an equivalent of button-up education information for folks during the Champlain Valley Fair and reaching a lot of people, trying to see if there's a way that we can leverage energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in the town to generate a little more revenue and to have that propagate more projects that can help the town. And also wanting to see if there's a possibility of doing solar development on a piece of town property, if it turns out to be feasible. So that's basically my pitch. The one thing I would say is I have my volunteer time has been stretched a little thin of late, so I've been less effective as chair than I've wanted to be. I think the only way to solve that, at least in my way of thinking through it, is to keep working at it and to try to set up so that I can ultimately develop a succession plan that would work. I do think that if we get a charter change and become the Essex Energy and Climate Committee, as I'm hoping we can, that may interest a group of younger people to join, which I think would be very important. But apart from that, I would say that I'm still committed to the cause. I still think it's a good idea to have this. I realize there's a lot of impediments to climate change, or at least funding for assisting with that at the federal level and at the state level in comparison to what was true 4 years ago. But I think we just have to keep at it.
I'll turn it over for board questions. Shannon.
I can get the show started. Thank you, Will, for joining. It's always nice to see people take advantage of the hybrid meetings. You touched on this briefly, and I'm kind of two questions for you from what you just presented, in addition to what you submitted ahead of time. The first is, as chair, I noticed that you have 2 vacancies on the committee, and I'm curious, what you are doing and what you could do moving forward if you were to be reappointed to fill those and get more people involved.
Well, it sounds like maybe we may have just ended up in the same place, because we had one resignation very recently, and it sounds like we have a new potential member in Rod. So I'm pleased a bit about that. The issue of vacancies is something that we address every single meeting. I ask my members, I say, if you know folks in the community who are interested, like for instance, employees of either renewable energy companies or the Efficiency Vermont, or other, folks with an interest, please get in touch with them and have them come to our meetings. And that's actually worked out pretty well, is just to try to use word of mouth. I also think the Champlain Valley Fair, as kind of the event where the greatest number or the greatest volume of people of any event in Vermont during the year pass through as part of those 2 weeks. We've stationed a table for sort of like 1 week out of the 2 and have gotten volunteers from other energy committees. And that gives us a certain amount of visibility and has helped us to recruit some members. Beyond that, to be honest, I think the only thing that will do it is if folks see some type of success in what we try to accomplish. And of course, that success depends on ultimately working with you as the select board to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right way and for the right amount of money.
Great. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
I just wanted to thank you for your, is it 8 years now? Is that, did I do the math right?
Yes, it is. Yes. Thanks
That's a big stretch to commit public service, and I know a lot about you, and I don't have any questions. I'm kind of sad to see you go, but I feel your stretched thinness. So
Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it. And like I say, I will stay on as long as I can, but I feel obligated to be thinking about this as kind of a succession, or at least thinking about a succession plan.
Andy?
So Will, in your application materials, you say only 1 year. You're looking for just 1 year. Is that enough time to put together your succession plan? Do you want a full term, and then you can resign when you choose?
Yeah, I wasn't very clear about that, Andy. It's a great point. I think that probably is the right way to go upon reflection. If we do the full term, and then if something happens, you know, I could envision a time, for instance, if I can find a new chair, that I'd be happy to kind of continue as a I guess a voice of experience. I hadn't even thought about this as 8 years, but you know, and then find a time to step down.
All right, thank you.
Time flies when you're having fun. Kendall, any
He
questions?
answered my question. So.
Okay. All set? Okay. Well, my only question is, do you have any questions for us?
No, not at the moment. I just appreciate everything that you guys are doing as always. And I think one thing I've learned in 8 years is how tough a job you have to do. So I'm all the more appreciative.
Thanks, Will. Again, we do have potential appointments later on in the agenda. So if you choose to stick around, great. If not, you will be notified likely tomorrow, but after this meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Next up is an interview to serve on the Economic Development Committee, Irene Renner. Come on up and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Good evening, everyone. 28-year resident of Essex, 20 years in this room as a volunteer on a number of committees, including 15 on Will's committee, which was a blast. I've been going to Economic Development Commission meetings for the last 10 years, more or less, and now I have some time. So I thought I'd volunteer to be on it.
Okay, questions from the board?
I'll go first. Hi, Irene. Do you have any ideas for things that may have been in the works or wanting to be in the works for the Economic Development Committee that you would prioritize with your membership?
I've seen a lot over 10 years. You know, we had a pandemic. We looked at the local option tax, the businesses coming in to sell cannabis. Talked about preserving the working landscapes. I'd like to do a little more work on that. I think the water tower is undergoing some renovations. Maybe there's some tourism someday ahead if we get the steps fixed. We can bring people back into the water tower as a historic building. The business directory, I think, could use some more work. It's been under development as long as I've been watching the meetings, and it still doesn't seem to be fully accessible to the public in a useful way, and the members of the commission still have questions about how to use it and what information is captured and what else we should be capturing. So I think that's a priority to still keep working on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon?
You touched on this in the beginning. I know you've been very involved in the town for years. Have you served on this committee before?
I have not.
Okay. Of all the committees, you know, why this one?
There's an opening.
True.
I've already put in 15 on the energy committee. It's time for someone else like Rod to have a chance. I like the overlap that EDC has with the planning and zoning areas. the Energy Committee a bit, Parks and Recreation even, we now have this farmer's market. To me, that's a little bit of an economic engine that we've self-generated, and I really like that. And I think Essex, even though it's half the size of the town when I started here, has still a lot of business interests, more than ever, actually. And it's exciting to me to see the potential still in Saxon Hill and other places to bring in new business and deal with some of the other challenges, including how do we feed people in that area of town, how do we get transportation to that area of town with a bus prospects threatened, and of course housing for workers, because the more we develop Saxon Hill, the more traffic we're going to have if people don't live nearby. So I think there's a lot of overlap and a lot of challenges there. I've attended the Milton Town Economic Development Commission meetings for the last 2 years, and they have a very broad board. They have 15 people that are assigned, appointed to that board, and it includes everyone from the town manager to the school principal, school superintendent, I guess she is, to the planning commission, the planning department head, and they have 5 or 6 business community members and then 5 or 6 citizens. And so it's a large group. And so it's just a different feel, and it's been fun for me to see how that works. They also, like our EDC, they go out and they have business roundtables and they have tours of local manufacturing sites, and I always get off on those. So there's nothing like being in a factory, being in a daycare, being in a local eatery, and seeing and talking with the proprietors and finding out why Essex and what can we do to help them. And so that's where I think where we learn the most.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Kendall, Andy?
I'm good.
All right. So I know you have a long history of being a public servant.
And storied.
And storied. So my question to you is, or one question, I may ask another, is in your own words, what does it mean to you to be a public servant?
It means taking my love of this community and amplifying it in a way that only volunteers can. Taking my passion for people, making sure that I'm out and about talking to folks to make sure that I understand whether or not they're informed about the latest issues that you folks are considering and that the other committees and commissions are considering, because things come up for votes very often, and the public is not aware of the depth or the breadth of some of those issues. So I'm known for knocking on doors. And that's not always easy in a rural district, and it's become more rural than urban of late. But that's always been my way to sense what the greater good is. Plus, I always learn a lot of history from the folks who've been here longer than me. And so when you sit in someone's foyer or you stand in their doorway and you just listen, you can learn an amazing amount of things. And that's always been something that's informed what I do here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my other question is, you were talking about going to a factory or going to a daycare, or you didn't mention any nonprofits. Just wondering if there's a place in the Economic Development Commission to look at services as well as for-profit businesses.
That's a great question. I don't know offhand if we visited any nonprofits. We, meaning me as public member and the EDC. But that's a great, I think we tend to look at the for-profit businesses right naturally, but yeah, we should figure out where they are and make sure we visit them too. Thanks for that idea.
Right. Thank you.
You're good.
I have a question now.
Go for it.
So in your application, it says your serving may take time away from running for office in the future. I would be interested in how running for office in the future would serve the Economic Development Committee you were on. Just curious.
What was the last word? Was it?
Assuming that you ran for office in the future and you're on the Economic Development Committee, how could that enhance that service?
Well, when I go to knock on doors, I learn a whole lot, and I can bring that back to the committee and say, guess what I heard? people don't understand why we're blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, for example, why are we doing a new town center? I think that's an economic driver for the town, as well as an expense for the town, as well as something that people have passionate feelings about. So when people express those feelings, I'll be very willing to bring that back to the committee and to the rest of you and let you know what I'm hearing and how we can, you know, counter any misinformation or whatever. Is that what you're getting at?
That's perfect.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good. Okay. My only question is, do you have any questions for us?
I just want to alert you to something that came up recently, and I think it's just sort of a hiccup, but in recent weeks we've had, sorry, I'm using the royal we, the Economic Development Commission has had a lot of activity with a consulting firm, and it has caused them to meet at off times. Normally the meetings are at 8 a.m. every other Thursday, but they've had meetings on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and people on the commission who have jobs and lives have found that to be really challenging. And I don't want to lose any members because it's already hard to get a quorum as it is on that commission. So I would just ask that, not you necessarily, but I'll just put it out there that it's extremely important that we stick to the schedules that people agreed to in the beginning. And for what we're paying this consultant, I think it's too bad that they couldn't switch their schedule around to meet the volunteers' constraints, because the volunteers do have, you know, in many cases a 9-to-5 job that they just really can't get out of in a way that doesn't make it awkward for them. And I guess maybe I had one more question. I think staffing in all the committees is really important. We used to be staffed by the town manager. We've been staffed by other folks over time, and I just think that that's important to understand that, for example, when we had the town manager staff the EDC, we got a lot of information about what properties had been recently bought and sold, you know, not houses, but like commercial properties. Infrastructure information, like there has been a water main break, and so this caused some confusion and some problems with this business and that business. Transportation issues, a lot of things go to the town manager first, and I realize that he or she can't always tell the EDC everything. But when I went to those Milton Economic Development Commission meetings with Don Turner as the town manager, and he has since passed away, unfortunately, but he had such a pulse on what was going on in that town, and he would bring it all to the EDC, and so that those 15 people, plus the public, really got a sense every month of the pulse of what was going on in town. And I don't get that sense anymore coming to the Essex EDC meetings. So I don't know if Karen can help staff that or whether Greg could, but I think a committee like that has so much overlap with other committees and with infrastructure and business, I think it's imperative that we have someone who's really on top of all that's going on here and can relay that to the EDC so they can then act on those factoids. Thanks.
Thank you. Same for you. Later in the agenda,
Okay.
possible appointments, you can stick around, you can head out. Either way, you'll be hearing from us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. This brings us to consider approval of resolution to withdraw from Green Mountain Transit Authority in fiscal year 27. We've had multiple conversations around this item for the fiscal year that starts on July 1st. We had almost 29.5%, just shy, increase over FY25, reductions in frequency of routes, more money, less services. I'll just be brief and blunt since we've had this conversation multiple times before. So there was some information in our packet with a few options. Greg, I don't know if you want to present these.
Sure, and I'll just start by saying that staff does recommend you discuss contracts in executive session later on, but we wanted to have some public discussion just in case there was anyone from the public who wanted to speak up. We have a couple of representatives from Green Mountain Transit here tonight. Clayton Clark, the general manager, and Paul Boney, Essex's rep to GMT. And as Tracy just mentioned, Essex and all GMT members have faced an increase of cost and a decrease of service. Essex's numbers are here, so I don't know the specifics of other communities. This is the result of GMT facing budget shortfalls, budget challenges, everything from, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but decreased ridership, lack of funding that used to be relied on from the state has dried up to some extent, although maybe some money coming in. But basically, the select board started talking about this in light of the increased costs and the decreased services about almost a year ago, last fall probably, and started talking about if it makes sense to remain in GMT, remain a member of Green Mountain Transit. That is still the discussion that's before you tonight and the decision. To leave GMT, you do need to give at least one fiscal year's notice. The deadline to do that would be tomorrow morning, essentially, to get to the GMT board for their meeting tomorrow. You would remain a member for fiscal year 26, and the membership would cease in fiscal year 27. That's how that process would play out. There's been a lot of discussion about what alternative options might be. Unfortunately, none of it is as black and white as would be nice. We've been told that Essex could pass the resolution to withdraw from GMT, but then negotiate a little bit and then decide whether or not you want to actually act on that withdrawal, or if you want to remain a GMT member. That's not prescribed in statute. GMT is a municipality. They have a charter just like we do. So it talks about the process to leave, but not the process to stay. It does speak to the process to get back in if you're not a member, or how to join if you're not a member, but it doesn't speak to this kind of transition period. We've talked about and looked into a little bit the options to withdraw and negotiate with GMT to receive service as a non-member. That is something that the town of Colchester does. Exactly how it would play out in Essex, we don't know. We have not had time to get into the details of those negotiations, and at the risk of speaking a little bit for GMT, they still have some uncertainty with their finances and their future, so not quite sure how it would play out to deal with their challenges while also trying to provide service to a non-member. Not to say it can't be done or wouldn't be done, we just don't know. It has not been really vetted at this point. Let's see. One option, Essex could look to provide its own transit service. We do think that would cost quite a bit of money, more than we pay in GMT dues is our rough estimate, and that's also depends on what services people would want, how they would want it, how often we could provide it. So those are some of the options before you. Again, recommend we discuss some more details in executive session, but wanted to put that out for you tonight in case there's any questions or public feedback that we want to hear. And we do have, as I said, our GMT reps who might be able to answer questions or speak to some of the issues at hand.
Any questions from the board? No? Andy?
Yeah, I asked this question before, and I'm sorry I'm going to repeat it. This is the question of if we vote to leave but then decide not to before the next fiscal year starts, is a vote required, or is it would it only be a select board decision? Because I know if we leave completely, we have to vote we would have to vote to return.
And Clayton, if you could come up
Come
to
to
the,
the
just
mic,
so
yeah.
folks online can hear fully.
Hi,
Thank
for the
you.
record, Clayton Clark, General Manager for Green Mountain Transit. And if you were to change your mind in fiscal year 26 before you actually departed, I don't see a reason why it would need more than just the select board's decision.
Okay, that's what I remembered too. And then, but then we would have to know budgetarily. We would have to know. We would not have to know how much to put in our budget by January. So we would. Of course, then yeah, right. Could be a contractual amount. Yeah. Okay.
Right, and also GMT is going to be putting their budget together in the fall. We typically rely on a dues estimate from them, and I'm guessing that how Essex moves forward, with or without membership of GMT, if you're wanting to get that service, that's going to have cost implication for us and for them.
And then also understanding that the state funds come from the legislature and they come next in the order of operations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, and I appreciate you coming. Last time you were here, you mentioned that you are a member of Essex. That's correct.
Yes, I'm a resident of the town of Essex. Yes.
And it might have been a comment just on the side, but I remember you saying that you think it's a good idea for us to consider, leaving the contract. I'm curious if you could expand on that.
Well, I think that the situation at hand where our smaller communities are looking at reductions and then still getting assessments that, for the same level or higher, has been hitting our smaller communities bigger than our larger communities. And so I think that that's why you see that Heinsberg decided last year to depart. And so I think that there's just sort of a fundamental difference in how the municipalities look at GMT, depending on, the city of Burlington with their $2 million contribution just has a very different perspective than the town of Essex. And so I think that what I would encourage each municipality to do is to sort of think about what makes sense for them and the municipality, because I wouldn't want, as the general manager for GMT, to come in here and tell you what's best for the town of Essex, because that's where I see your role. I do think that Aaron Frank, the town manager for Colchester, a former assistant general manager at GMT, I think that the pathway that he picked makes a lot of sense for Colchester and may make sense for the town of Essex, and so that's why I would encourage you to consider that. And you may look at it and decide that the pros and cons are different. To me, the biggest con, of course, is that right now you have a significant influence over us because you have a representative and he's an officer and the treasurer, and so Colchester really doesn't have that. They have the ability to negotiate with us, but they don't really have an ability to sort of influence our long-range planning and sort of our philosophy. And so I think that's an important thing that I would consider for you all.
Thank you.
Other questions? Now I'm going to open it up for public comment on this agenda item. So again, if you're in the room, you can raise your virtual or your physical hand, excuse me. If you're online, you can go to the bottom center of your screen, hit the react button, and you can raise your hand from there. I do see Lorraine Zaloom. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chair. One question on the counts. I was there for the GMT presentation. One of my concern was the count that they gave didn't seem to jive with my niece, who was riding on a regular basis because it was used for school. And so when we took a deeper dive into how they counted, I was kind of surprised. It didn't sound like they even had a clicker necessarily for all the people that got on and off. And I'm not sure it was done for all the bus routes. So I felt like the assessment was poorly handled, unfortunately, in terms of understanding the real quantity and need. I thought it wasn't a good needs assessment. Our niece had long shared the amount of people that were using the bus, certainly for school. And of course, we know what's happening with school, and the other concern is the impact on their school budgets. As we know, our school taxes are high as well. And so I was just wondering if there was consideration about and working with the school district in terms of what their plans were for busing and how us withdrawing would impact our school taxes. Thanks.
Speak to the assessment for the number of riders, but I see Clayton is coming up. I will say that we did invite EWSD representatives to, I believe it was the last meeting that we discussed this. They gave some input. I believe we also extended an invitation to them for this evening as well, to provide input. But it's definitely been an ongoing conversation.
Yep.
Clayton.
So I just wanted to let folks know that for the assessments, that they're based on the amount of time our buses are in each of the communities and not based on ridership. And so at least when it comes to the fixed route service. When it comes to the paratransit ADA service, that is based on the specific number of rides, both for the community that the person starts their trip in and the community that it ends in. But for fixed route, the assessment is entirely based on the number of hours the bus is in service in the municipality.
Were there any other questions from folks online? Lorraine, is that a repeat hand or?
No, it was just for clarification. I just want to understand the data then. So there is no actual ridership count for the main routes, if that's what I'm hearing?
So there is a ridership count, but it doesn't influence the assessments.
Okay, I see. I use the phrase assessment, but I wasn't talking about the monetary assessment. I was speaking of the assessment of riders.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So no, that's phrasing. I should have phrased that better.
So I'm sorry, now I'm even more confused. I'm so sorry, you guys. So what the needs assessment is not necessarily, when you talked about assessment, you're referring to the needs assessment? Or the cost assessment?
When we talk about assessments, it's the amount that each municipality pays, and so I'm sorry for that confusion. If you're referring to VTrans issues a route performance report each year, and that route performance report does provide the cost per rider, and that report card is based on overall ridership numbers.
I'm sorry. So I recall, because you presented it, I recall being there with you. My niece was there with us because I was asking, how did you actually count? So how was the actual count done again? Because that's what surprised me, was how the count was done.
So there's multiple ways. Prior to us returning to fares in 2024, we would actually pay people to ride the buses and count people getting on or off. And then that would provide us with stop level data so that we would know not only where they're getting on the bus, but where they're getting off the bus. Since returning to fare service in May of 2024, we do get additional information just because of people paying to get on the bus. And so that means that we have more robust data going forward. And so, of course, our fiscal year is from July to June, and so that means that the fiscal year 25 that we're in now will be the first fiscal year that we have the full fare data to inform our rider counts since returning to fare service.
So if I'm understanding right, the fare now is the actual count, the clicker in a way.
That is one way that we do it. Yes, we actually we bump it up against also what the driver is reporting. So that there's multiple data sets that we use.
But we have about 1 year's worth of fare counts now. It just hasn't been. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. That eases my mind because that's a much better way to count in my view. Thank you.
Happy to report, completely separate, that the newest buses that we've received also have the automated passenger counters, and in the next year we'll have the software that will activate those so that we will get another way to count, and that will have automatic counting of people getting on and off for those buses.
Perfect.
So one more question, was there a disparity between the assessment pre the fare count then and now and what the fare revealed? Were there any surprises in what you had assessed and what actual data came through?
There's no surprise. Nothing came out with where we had a route where we thought the ridership was low and that it turned out to be much higher than we expected. So unfortunately, no, because that would have been helpful for a consideration of the 3 routes that were performing poorly on that report.
Great. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Are there any other, Ethan?
I got a question for you, Clayton. Sorry.
Don't go too far.
I'm just trying to jog my memory here on our conversation of last, and we were going down the path of Essex could submit a resolution to remove itself.
Yep.
But there was some talk that the board was also working on looking at the reassessment
Yes.
mechanism.
Yes.
So I just wanted to comment that you know, my position on the select board isn't promised to make that decision when it comes, but there is a possibility that the town of Essex completes the resolution to remove itself from GMT,
Mm-hmm.
and GMT's board comes up with a different mechanism for the assessment on the entire town and specifically the route that carries the Sandhill 117.
Yes.
And then the town could, justify one bus for X amount of dollars and then continue its service with GMT all before June 26.
Yes. So before fiscal year 27 starts, so
Right.
like next June of 2026. Yes.
Yeah.
We are expecting to have our scope of work done with CCRPC this week. They're the contractor that's going to be doing the assessment with us, plans on having that done by December. And so that would give us plenty of time to look at what the new methodology would be before you'd have to make a decision.
Final decision.
A final decision, yes.
Okay. Perfect. I just wanted to, I remembered that, but it's been hot for a couple of days, so I went camping all weekend, sat by the pool.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you for that timeline. That's helpful. Are we good to move forward, understanding we'll likely come back to this in executive? Okay. Thank you, Clay. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say good luck with your decision. We're going to love the town of Essex no matter what you decide and try to provide as much service as we can. And so good luck.
Thank you, Clayton. Next up, consider final adoption of proposed amendments to the impact fee ordinance. We've had this on multiple agendas. We had our public hearing earlier this evening. Are there any additional questions from members of the board?
I think we talked about this a lot.
Yes. Ethan?
I have a motion, unless there's any other questions.
Just to
Oh,
be
public comment.
thorough, I will also ask if there is any public input on this specific item, either in the room or online. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Ethan? Oh,
I just have a comment I just wanted to state. I really appreciated the acceptance of when I asked for this to be delayed a little bit further, for that sent back to the committees to get both the Housing Commission and the EDC's impact assessment of what this would do. I think it's important that we not only appoint people to boards, but we listen to them when we're asking about issues like this. So I'm glad we were amenable to making time for those opportunities to occur. So I'm glad to see we got both.
good comment. Ethan?
Make the motion, the select board approve the final passage of the proposed amendments to the town's impact fee ordinance with an effective date of July 15th, 2025.
Thank you. Ethan, is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Shannon. Final discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to our next item. Consider approval of Schedule A for fire impact fees and recreation impact fees. I'll ask for clarifying questions or discussion from the board. Seeing none, I will turn it over for public comment, public input, either in the room or online. Seeing none, back to the board, and I would entertain a motion.
Oh, it just disappeared. Oh, there it is.
All right, I make the motion that the, oh, okay. I make the motion that the select board adopt Schedule A specifying option A as the specific fees to be collected to go into effect July 15, 2025.
Thank you. Andy, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ethan, final discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next on our agenda, consider approval of amendments to the fund balance policy. Greg, do you want to introduce this one? I apologize. I did not have it pulled up and ready to go.
Do you want to? Do you want to?
Sure. So, my understanding is every April the board reviews and recommits to policies that have an impact on how business is conducted throughout the year. One of them is the fund balance policy. There was a lot of discussion about a number of different things. What's coming back to you tonight is a change in the review process of how fund balance assignments, should they need to be made, are completed. Shannon had talked a lot about wanting to add transparency to the process and adding a public hearing at the time prior to fund balance assignments being made, just to take public input and kind of additional outreach associated with letting folks know about that opportunity. I hope, not putting words in your mouth, Shannon, but those were the goals. So staff talked about it and can support that change with the timing of the audit. So we're actually in a good time with recently taking proposals from firms interested in doing the audit and executing a new contract in the quite near future. There's actually an opportunity to build that into our process. So it's a decent time to have this discussion. And Andy kindly reminded me earlier today that he had offered some comments about timing and what constitutes a fund balance assignment. Is that something that we would consider extending to other decisions that the board makes throughout the year outside of that operating budget timeframe? So hopefully we can discuss that as well.
Questions? Discussion? Andy?
Yeah, my concern is that there have been many times in my tenure where if we have bad weather in May, we don't finish the paving, and then Public Works comes to us and said, hey, we're not going to be able to spend all of our current year's funds on paving. We'd like to use it in the latter half of the summer because the year changes in the middle of paving season. And so that happens on a somewhat regular basis. Doesn't happen every year, but that's a fund balance decision. We're taking money from one year and spending it in another. Police vehicles are another one where if a purchase is initiated in one fiscal year and because lead times are long and unpredictable, sometimes they pass into the next fiscal year. We get requests from the police department to allow them to use fund balance to pay for it in the following year. So there are multiple, I've seen community development come because they had a final report for a study that they were doing. So there's many cases where spending needs to transition across a fiscal year, and is our intent to have a public hearing for all of those. If I read this, that's what that says we're going to do.
Yeah, we to be honest didn't get into the weeds that far. That was not really the intent. We were thinking more when we talked to Shannon about this, more thinking about the assignment process that happens in December timeframe. I think anywhere between November and January, where we have a final amount that was unspent above and beyond the 15% that has not been assigned, with the very good examples that you made. So we were more, as we talked about this, focused on that December process, but all very good points. And I'm not sure if, I guess I don't want to speak for Shannon of what he has in mind or had in mind as far as this proposed change.
No, I mean, I think Karen and Greg have both said it pretty perfectly, that the point of this and my intent, as we brought up at my very first meeting, was for this fund balance having more transparency and making sure the public is involved. And I had a number of ways that I said we could do it from a public vote, and you did bring up some good points about, how does this affect the process and everything else like that. I'm focusing on this, single line edit as focusing on the January, February timeline when we have the large amount of fund balance, not the intermittent ones throughout the year that may occur.
Andy?
It could be argued that that's a budgeting policy, not a fund balance policy, because we have done that. Except for last year, we changed something. We did something different for in our last budget cycle. We have within the last 5 or 6 years gone into the situation where we put fund balance in as a revenue in our budget, and then we spend it that way. This year, there was a big focus on capital transfers or operating transfers to capital. And we had a situation where we had a $250,000 fund balance that we were going to use to buy down taxes. And we had a $400 and some thousand capital transfer. So I made the suggestion that rather than run it through the budget, we just transfer it directly. And that's where I think that's the first time I'm aware of ever us making a large transfer like that without running it through the budget. And so, I remember at the time saying it's a less transparent way to do it, and I've gotten criticized for this because it took out the real thing that it did to the budget was take out $2,500 associated with the 1% human service charge. And so at the time we were nickel and diming the budget. We were taking little amounts out of the library, we were taking little amounts out of everywhere, and I said, well, here's a way to do that. So we did that. It's the first time we've ever done that to a large fund balance transfer, and it fundamentally, in my view, was initiated because of the $2,500 that gets added to every, or the 1% that gets added to every operational capital transfer because of that 1%. So yeah, I think this should be and we already do public hearings for the budget, which includes all of those line items, and we've been doing that for a number of years now. We bypassed it this year to save $2,500, and I'm sorry that I ever suggested that for a couple of reasons. But it did highlight to me as I was thinking about this today, Karen, after reading your response, is all of those fund balance transfers that we do in the budget get the 1% charged twice, because they were in the budget before the 1% was added. We're adding it back into the budget as a spend, also as a revenue, so it really has a net zero value, except we're also adding 1% to it again for the human services. And so my thought is that rather than hitting the bogey twice, anytime we do one of these fund transfers or one of these, the fund balance, running it through the budget, we exempt it from that 1%. People are going to hate me for saying that, but the truth of the matter is it's actually more than 1%, because it's getting hit a second time when you run it through there. And so I'm fine with doing it that way. I'm just questioning the fact of whether it's a budgeting policy or process or practice, or whether it should be a fund balance, because it confuses things with these end of the fiscal year, unless we somehow explicitly change the language and say this only applies to post-audit fund balance associated with future fiscal year budgeting or something like that.
Basically, we subtract fund balance utilization from the operating budget, and that's our 1%, as opposed to the total. Yeah. Ethan?
So, I kind of have the opposite idea of how that plays out, because when you put fund balance in the budget from a previous year, and when our goal is to budget for 0 fund balance, right? As soon as you add fund balance into the budget, whether it's a capital transfer or purchase of a police car for that year, or vice versa, the budget is simultaneously inflated by that fund balance amount, and you automatically have a shortage the following year based on fulfilling the amount of fund balance that's put into the budget as a revenue, because you're not counting on having a revenue like this year coming. We're going to get down to capital, right? We have it's a little bit different because we did a capital tax increase, so there's going to be some room in it, and it got approved. But had it not gotten approved, there would have been a $250,000 gap in capital operating transfers.
That's only true if that's a recurring expense.
Right, and there are
We had
recurring expenses.
$250,000 this year, and we knew that we needed a thing each year for the next 5 years. We used $250,000 of fund balance to do that. The following year, we still have to find that ongoing $250,000 from somewhere.
Right.
So a vehicle purchase, since that's just a one-time, like you're not going to pay for the same vehicle 2 years in a row, that wouldn't happen that way. But if you had an IT expense, any recurring expense, staff costs, insurance, so on and so forth, yes, that would be true.
Right, but the matter of the facts are that the budget, the fund balance has been over $500,000 for all 4 years of my time on the select board, and the budget has yet to go down $500,000 in 1 year. So that just has proven faults. Once that money is put in there, the town is looking at that whole budget number and saying, well, we can add 3% to that, and that number continues to grow every year. That fund balance that you put on top of the budget continues to grow by that 3%. So that $500,000 from 4 years ago has inflated itself 12-15% by this point. And it hasn't been taken back out of the budget. The budget has continued to grow every year with that amount in there under the revenue line items. And this year, we have something to look at, but that's why when you use fund balance, I understand with a police car, the $90,000, that's not put back into the budget. But the way that this capital push has gone for years is that couple $100,000 is put in as a line item and then covered with revenue. So when you run out of fund balance, or you get to that 15% savings, you are going to have whatever amount you've been inflating or subsidizing, however you want to say it, is going to come up as a shorthand. And this year, depending on how the numbers work out, it's going to be roughly $250,000 increase, which is going to be a 3% increase. I mean, I can draw this down on paper more to show how it's happened over 4 years. I could go back 10 years to speak on it, but the point of this is that, and the discussion was brought up when we talked about fund balance, was what is the assignments, because there was the discussion about committed and assigned, right? And committed couldn't be repurposed per se. I don't want to say reassigned because it's not assigned, it's committed, but repurposed. But assigned fund balance was at the leisure of reassignment via the sitting select board. So I think in this kind of conversation with the public hearing is that maybe the thing to do with the fund balance is to sit down every year, have a public hearing, and fully commit the funds. That way the funds are removed from the budget completely. And the general budget is the general budget, and you can watch your operating budget and you know, that's the whole idea, to remove capital transfers out of it also, but more so on focusing on fund balance. If you were to have a separate process with a totally separate of the budget, of it on its own process, fund balance, and you went and committed those funds, then you could say, well, that fund balance is essentially gone. Even if the money sits in a different account for 2 or 3 years until the fulfillment is made to you know, a lot of it went to capital for, you know, 5-year vehicle replacement, or, you know, buildings or projects, water sewer project. There was money that was moved there, and then, you know, we moved some money for future development of Upper Main Street, and all of that money was given a commitment. And that, you know, that was what I was told when we brought this up the last time, was that money isn't to be reassigned, but anything that was assigned could be reassigned. So I think that the whole process of the fund balance should be spending excess funds and not budgeting with excess funds. And I think that the public hearing is a way to do that. But
Yeah, so there's, essentially that's what the proposal is, to just add a public hearing before we assign unassigned funds.
Greg has a.
Greg, sorry.
Yeah, that was the proposal. I do want to just draw attention to what Andy had brought up. You know, the police vehicle that we plan to budget, we order it in fiscal year 25. It doesn't show up until fiscal year 27. The paving that had money budgeted to be done in May and June of one year doesn't happen because of weather. It rolls into the next year. Those are very legitimate, valid things that happen in some form or another almost every year. And so if we have to have a public hearing for each time there's a fund balance assignment, there's a potential for that vehicle purchase is going to get delayed. That paving is going to get further delayed. It's something that we had not factored into the proposal that we're giving you tonight. So I guess with that in mind, I'd ask that the input is helpful and would be very much valuable to see which direction you want to go, but I would ask that you don't vote on this tonight so we can give that some more thought and take your feedback and figure out if there's a way to apply a public hearing to some but not all of the fund balances without postponing our operations or delaying purchases that have been budgeted, and think about how do we apply this to the one-time expenses, the capital transfers, the types of assignments that you typically see in December without necessarily negatively impacting the services and equipment that we had planned to provide the previous fiscal year that just didn't arrive for whatever reason.
Is there any objection to moving this to a future agenda when we can have more information on potential unintended consequences?
I have a question.
Andy?
Do public hearings cost money because we have to advertise them?
Yes.
$75.
Hmm?
I think it says it in the memo.
$75, yeah. I just want to bring that up, that if we want to have a public hearing and then if we have the public hearing at the beginning of the meeting of an agenda and then vote on it in the same agenda, why bother, given that it's already a warned topic in a meeting? We never make any fund balance decisions without warning it on an agenda. So to have the extra expense and the extra time of a public hearing when it's already an agenda item that we're going to discuss, the public has the ability to have input on. I don't understand the need to do two agenda items in one meeting, just for the sake of saying we had a public hearing.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think the goal was to just have additional awareness. You know, some folks will, if they see a public hearing, but if they see a regular meeting, for certain folks, it doesn't rise to that level of importance or awareness. That's my own personal interpretation.
To build off of that, as we just saw with the ordinance with the fire, we've been talking about that for 5 meetings now at the same point, and it was, you have to vote on it to announce the public meeting, and then you have to 2 weeks goes by, so it would give us a lot more, in my opinion, transparency and awareness of what is actually happening. I do think, if it was just we're going to announce the public hearing, vote in the forefront of the meeting, and then 2 minutes later vote on it, yeah, that doesn't make sense, but that's not how public hearing always works.
But if it's a $1,700 final payment for a report for the economic development, why would we go through all the trouble of having a public hearing to make a decision on a $1,700 final payment for?
Yeah, and I think that maybe one of the questions that Greg and Karen are going to take away is, are there, specific triggers where it makes sense if, just expand on it a little bit more, based on some of your comments from earlier.
And the other thing is the only money we've ever reassigned is money that was assigned to future tax relief. We've never assigned something in a given year and then reassigned it. It's always been, because we've started this back when we were talking about the merger. We at one point started putting money aside for future merger expenses. So there was fund balance accumulating in those things. We've spent all of that, and now with the separation, we've been trying to taper down our use of. We got lucky during COVID. There was a lot of money we didn't need to spend because it was covered by federal dollars or state dollars or whatever. So we had a bunch of leftover funds there, and we accumulated that into future relief. And we actually physically put it into different years, and that's where that $250,000 came from. It was from money that we had set aside for future tax relief. We decided to spend it slightly differently by just going around the budget instead of through the budget. But we've only ever reassigned money that was assigned for a general purpose of tax relief in the future, or merger expenses back in the day.
So we'll talk about this at another future meeting. Okay. Circle that, make a note. Our next item, consider approval of grant application to Vermont Agency of Transportation, funding assistance for design and construction of multi-use path, Vermont 15, Orleans Road, 289. Good evening, folks.
Hello, good evening. My name's Kent Johnson. I'm the town planner. So I put together a memo for you about this. I'll just touch on a couple of the high points and then answer any questions that you have. In 2018, a scoping study was completed about making a new bicycle and pedestrian facility along Route 15 between Athens Drive and 289. The findings of the report were actually a slightly longer scope there, but that's the area that we're talking about. Once the scoping study was finished, it was supported by staff and then later by the select board. Now we have the opportunity to get design and construction money from the Agency of Transportation. They've opened another invitation to seek grant funding. So you first have to have the scoping study, and then once that's done, you can go for the design and construction funding. So this seemed like a priority of staff and the select board, and this is also what we heard from the public in the last town planning process that we went through, that improving bike and pedestrian connectivity was really important to the community. So we have an opportunity now to apply for this funding. In order to apply for the funding, the select board needs to show a willingness to go through with actually doing the project, because that's what the Agency of Transportation would like to see. It doesn't, at this point, commit you to anything, but it lets them know that you're serious about it, and it gives you a chance to ask questions about it before the application is completed. The application needs to be submitted by July 11th, so that comes before you meet next. We have had the engineer that performed the original scoping study update the cost estimates because it's been a little bit of time since 2018. So the numbers are not surprisingly quite a bit higher than they were before, which is to be expected. And in addition to the increase in costs, they've added a 20% contingency on top of those numbers, so that inflates it even higher. Since we are looking to segment the project into two different pieces to help keep the cost to the town and the Agency of Transportation slightly lower, by segmenting it into two projects, that also increases the cost as well. We would be asking for a total project cost to do the piece of the work between Orleans and the far side of 289, so we could connect to the existing path that's next to McDonald's. For that section, which has logical termination points at the existing path up by McDonald's and at Orleans, where you can go into the neighborhood and then connect into the existing network there, that total amount is being estimated at about $1.8 million. 80% of that would be from VTrans, and the other 20% being from the town. It's a reimbursement grant, so you'd need to pay everything up front periodically as time would go, and then you'd get reimbursed for up to 80%. If you're looking for a project that would take at least 5 years to go through all the different phases of it, so the costs would be spread out over 5 or more years. Do you have any particular questions?
Shannon?
Thank you, Kent, for all your work and the staff as well. I spoke with a member of the VHB, the lead bicycle engineering engineer, I guess his name is. He was saying, and I said, what's your thoughts on this? And he said that industry standard now is more of a 10-foot path rather than 8-foot.
Mm-hmm.
Has that also, I know you've talked about how from 2018 to 2025, we've seen the costs go up. Have the standards also increased where we need this to be a 10-foot path rather than 8 feet?
Yeah, and when I did contact a representative from VTrans, I did ask about that. The person from VTrans was a bit concerned that this was recommended below the standards that they would normally expect, which would be 10 feet unless there's, for some reason, you would need to narrow it down. You could narrow it down to 8 feet. It seems like originally 8 feet was the preferred alternative just because it was less expensive than 10 feet. In this particular case, we have some compelling reasons to ask for a narrower path. We have some rock ledge that needs to be blasted. That's quite expensive, especially when you also have utilities in that area as well. And there is some land acquisition that's required for this work too. So we're trying to minimize the cost of that and also the impact to adjacent property owners. I think one thing that we could do that might be a good middle ground going forward is in the areas where we do have a particular reason to go down to 8 feet, then we go down to 8 feet, and in the areas that we can go up to 10 feet, that we go up to 10 feet. So we try to, instead of just saying we're going to consistently go with 8, we're going to really go with what makes sense along there. I think that that's part that could be addressed in the design phase. It does increase the cost a bit, and the engineer did update the cost estimates looking at the 10-foot width versus the 8-foot width. In the end, the representative from VTrans said, you have a scoping study, it was approved by staff and by the select board, that was, the consideration of the cost was probably already thought of, and going with the narrower width, you'd probably be best off just going with what was already approved in your scoping study. That was the purpose of the scoping study, and now you would ask for funding to design and construct the project. So I could kind of picture a little bit of some room there to try to widen it out a little bit, since that is a concern of VTrans, but I think we should feel I guess that's where I'd go with that.
And could, if you just chose to, vary depending on the terrain, would that be covered in that additional 20% that you were talking about?
The 20% contingency that's added in there. No, I think what we'd need to do is when the consultant updated the cost estimate, we'd need to go through in a more fine grain detail to look at those areas, because they looked at they were looking at the entire length when they were coming up with those numbers. We could ask them to go back and make a more to break out those numbers a little bit better.
Thank you. My last question is about the phasing out of the project. I know initially it was thought to be just one fell swoop. Since that time, we've had that new development pop up in Orleans, and driving to this meeting, I went down that whole route this path would go, looking at it very consciously. And maybe there's a historical answer to this or projected, but my fear is that if we phase this out, we do 75% of the project, we're never going to get that last 25%, or it's going to take a very long time. What are your thoughts on that as, community development and staffer to the CTC?
I think that it would be better if we could do all the project at once. The extra complexity with that is part of it's in Essex Junction, and they don't have any funding budgeted for it right now. We do have projected funding in our capital program to account for this project already. I did talk with them, and they said that they would try to make a good faith effort, but there's not really a whole lot of time to get any kind of commitment because they need to go through their own budgeting process for it. So I think it would make sense in that way to break it up, and I think it would be a really good project to have a partnership with the City of Essex Junction. We have it would leave around 800 feet or so of our right-of-way, and then another maybe 700 feet of the city. So it seems like that's a project that's a smaller scale, and we could probably work well together on that and give them time that they could come up with the budget amounts. The other thing that is helpful about phasing it is, I think, looking historically at the amounts of the awards from VTrans, they don't go above $1 million very often for a project. We are looking at already asking them for 1.4 or 1.45 million dollars already. That's a pretty high ask for them. Ideally, I think it would be good to ask for less, but there's not a logical way of shrinking the project down any further, and you really want to have logical termination points.
Thank you.
Ethan.
So, I heard you say that up to 80%, and then in here it also is, it's worded a couple different ways, but it says at least. So could you tell me some of the factors that would make us eligible for the full 80 and not eligible for the full 80?
Right. So you'll be reimbursed 80% if you. The time that you might not get reimbursed is if you spent your money on expenses that were not eligible for reimbursement. If there was something else that you were going to add into the project that wasn't originally in the scope of work.
Okay.
You try very hard not to do that as you're going through the project. But sometimes something might come up. It's not exactly related to the project, but it makes sense to add it on. So those things come up sometimes, but you want to be very mindful before you do the work that it's an eligible expense for it. So my expectation is that we would get 80% back.
Under the original approved scope.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Not, I will open it up for public comment on this item.
Madam Chair, board members, Ken Signorello, Essex resident. I only have one question. What input did the Conservation and Trails Committee have on this project? Seems like a great project. I'm wondering.
No, that's a great question. There's really not been time for any input from anybody with this at this point. This is trying to follow up on a grant opportunity for following the direction that's already been set by the select board and by staff. So there hasn't been any other community input that's gone along with this. If this project is awarded, it would have its own design and public participation process that would happen as part of the project. Typically, applying for grants, you wouldn't have a pre-public participation project process leading up to a grant application.
Andy?
Oh, actually,
Greg.
might say the same thing I am. So I was on the select board that approved the preferred option, and there were multiple options that we looked at, and we did have public discourse about it. So it's not, and thank you, Darren, for nodding your head there. Yes, so it's not, in answering that question, you're talking about this particular grant application. Back in 2018, there certainly was public input and comment and all of that around this whole thing.
Right, and just to add to that, that is what I was going to say. And this project probably goes back to at least 2014, 2015, when we had a combined bike and pedestrian plan with Essex Junction and the town. And this was one of those high priority projects that was identified 10 or more years ago. But that process had a lot of public input as well.
Betsy, yep. Yeah, come forward. Sorry, no, my brain
Betsy
just
Dunn, Essex
kind of
resident.
skipped a beat there.
Thank you. And to further what Mr. Signorella said, this is one of the things on our worksheet that we were thinking about doing, and not including the CTC. It seems like an error that we're not just the public, we're people who are serving for this town voluntarily, and we have an interest in it. I was sorry to hear that we didn't hear about this beforehand, because we sometimes can problem solve some issues that you hadn't thought about. So I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah.
But
Well,
thank you
I
for
guess
your
I'm
work.
wondering, is the concern that of selecting the right project for going after the grant application? It's not the content of the project itself, it's which one you
No, I'm
select.
just going after the project. It's something that we did want to do. That was on our sheet, our worksheet.
Mhm.
And that you didn't need to do this on your own, and it's been out there, but you didn't come back to us. That just kind of is.
Betsy, if I,
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm
No.
not trying to make it about. I'm not trying to make it about him.
no, but I'll take. Please blame me for that. That's my fault.
Okay.
Ken brought this to Karen and me recently, and he identified an opportunity. It's been on our work plan for 10 years, at least, and we saw an opportunity to go after it. I've been talking to Kent. I said, yeah, let's get it on the select board agenda. It's coming up. We have to the grant application deadline. Better circumstances, yes, I would have asked him to take it to the Conservation and Trails Committee and get any final feedback. When I looked at it, I felt like we have a deadline coming up. It's been vetted in the past. We have an approved scoping study. Let's try to get that grant. So apologies,
Makes
didn't go to
sense.
Conservation and Trails Committee, but that's on me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Not seeing any other hands up online and none others in the room, I'll bring it back to Ethan.
I move the select board authorize staff to submit an application to VTrans to request funding assistance for the design and construction of the VT Route 15 shared use path in accordance with the preferred alternative approved by staff and the select board, and provide a letter of support acknowledging their willingness to provide the local match and accept future maintenance responsibility.
Thank
Second.
you, Ethan. Thank you, Shannon. The motion, it has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Is everybody clear on the motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay?
No.
Motion carries 4-1.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, consider opting into Act 181 Tier 1B status. He's back.
And in person tonight.
Yes. Figured I'd come down and see how things were going on in the junction for the town. I'm starting this, aren't I?
I'm sorry.
You asked me to start this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good to see you all again. And it's really also nice to see projects like the multi-use path come around, which, as you know, is something I worked on while I was working for the town. So I'm glad that will move forward. It'll be a great addition to the community if that happens. Tonight, we are here to talk about something else that is also a long-term project. Act 181, we've come to talk to you about several times over the last 6 months or so. And tonight we are here to focus on a very specific part of Act 181, which was intended to address the housing crisis statewide and align statewide land use regulation with regional and local planning in a way that we can all row in the same direction, particularly when it comes to Act 250. So that's what we're here to consider tonight. There is a provision in Act 181 that allows a municipality to opt in to an exemption from Act 250 which is the state land use review process. This exemption is specific for housing, and it's designed to allow for missing middle housing to move through the development review process a little more smoothly. So this exemption is specifically saying that any project of 10 to 50 housing units that is on 10 or fewer acres of land would be exempt from Act 250. A development project like that would still go through any local review processes, such as the Development Review Board or a zoning permit. It would also still have to get any statewide required permits, such as wetlands, fire and safety and building code, stormwater, V-Trans access if it's on a state highway, etc. So the idea is to remove that layer of review specifically about statewide and regional land use impacts for projects that are of a relatively narrow, small size, maybe bigger than the current Act 250 threshold, which is 10 units on 10 acres. The reason we're asking towns about this, and the reason this has come up, is that we want to make sure that in doing this work and in working on our regional plan, which CCRPC has been working on for the last several years, but more earnestly in the last 6 months, we want to make sure that communities are able to make that decision for themselves. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to say, if you're interested in having more housing development in parts of town where it is already consistent with your land use policies and it's of a limited size and scale, that you're able to say, yes, we want to support that. But this is a choice for communities. You do not have to opt into Tier 1B. You can say, we want to keep Act 250 review the way it is in Essex. The other element of this, and the reason it's part of our regional plan update, is that the eligible areas for Tier 1B exemption are specifically tied to our regional future land use map. There are certain areas, including centers, downtown centers, village centers, and planned growth areas and village areas, which you don't have any of in Essex under our draft map. Only in those areas can you apply for Tier 1B, and would these projects be exempt. Outside of those areas, in the rural parts of Essex, Act 250 would still operate the way it does today. And Catherine's going to pull up a map of what the Planning Commission has considered in this process, because they met a couple of times, including last Thursday, to discuss this issue, since they're the board with the little bit of expertise on development review and planning. So they talked. Still working on that.
Greg, could you give me permission to share? Yeah, thank you.
So they've discussed this and talked about a recommendation for specific parts of Essex to be eligible for Tier 1B. And that's the recommendation that's before you tonight. I tried to keep this discussion fairly focused on Tier 1B, knowing that you've had other opportunities to talk about the other elements of Act 181, including our map update as well as housing targets. They are interrelated, but this is a great example of something that the town could do to advance its goals for housing as consistent with the town plan, and that would help meet those housing targets. So it is a really good opportunity to encourage the type of development that's already promoted in your town plan in areas where you want to see it. So I'll let Catherine talk specifically about the Planning Commission's recommendations, and then I think we'll take some questions.
Okay, so the Planning Commission started wide, so maybe I should start with this map. Oh, it's not. Let me flip over.
Looks good up here.
Oh, it did. Okay, just slow. Right, sorry about that. So any of the areas on this map, so this is a zoom in of Essex, so any of the areas on this map that are of pink and purple, not lavender, which is like the really light purple, would be eligible for Tier 1B status. So those are the areas that Darren was talking about that are really are areas where we have seen and want to see growth. It's in our sewer core, essentially, is really what those boundaries are. Planning Commission was not comfortable saying exempting a lot of these areas from Act 250, mostly because they're neighborhoods, areas that are already pretty developed. Some have pretty small lots, some are bigger. They also thought about looking at where our our current GMT bus route goes, we have an existing exemption for Act 250, and the same thing with the between 10 and 50 units on 10 acres or less. That's an interim exemption. So the Planning Commission said, well, maybe we could do that. Then decided, let's really focus on the areas where we have already done studies that we've said we really do want to focus our growth on first. So the biggest area of discussion was the ETC next areas. So if you remember, I think it was in 2021, the ETC next plan was adopted. And this is a map from this plan. And it looked at so these areas that have check marks on it, particularly the areas where there's a suggested increase in density to allow further growth than we are seeing now. So you'll see the mixed use north, if you can see my cursor a little bit here, mixed use south, and then the neighborhood commercial, which is the brown area, and then in the ETC next plan, it's called the historic center. This area has recently been designated as a village center by the state. So those 4 areas is the recommendation of the Planning Commission for this area of town. So our Essex Town Center area. And then I hate how the little pop-up thing gets in the way of a cursor. Okay. The other area is over in Essex West. So this is the Susie Wilson Road area. We recently did a study with the Regional Planning Commission to look at what some build out of this area would be. We looked at sewer capacity. We looked at the types of uses or types of residential development that we could see. And the areas that are circled that have check marks are the areas that the Planning Commission recommended. So again, these are areas where we have historically seen growth. If you look back over the last 10 years or so, this is where we've seen developments of larger scale on smaller lots. So we've seen some development of larger scale, but on larger lots, so it would be over that 10 acres, so it wouldn't be eligible for Act 250 exemptions under this rule. So it's the retail business district in 2 spots. So so that's the light green here, and then also the light green up here, which is on Route 2A near the CERC. This big parcel is already developed, but this little parcel here, we could see a density of up to 12 units on that parcel. And then the mixed use area here. So this is Susie Wilson Road and Pinecrest Drive. So in this study with Regional Planning Commission, we also looked at these blue areas, which is the medium density residential, decided that was not really where we wanted to see a significant growth. So I'm saying this is me talking with the Planning Commission. So in the end, this is the Planning Commission's recommendation that they voted on at their last meeting. And so the hope this evening is that that you would sign the resolution that's in your packet that says that you are requesting Tier 1B status for these areas that I just showed you on these 2 maps.
Questions? Ethan?
So just for clarification, it's only the check marks.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what.
Because otherwise, I had some serious concerns. But
Only the check marks. Yes.
Shannon?
Sorry to make you flip back and forth. Could you go back to the Essex West
Sure.
page? I'm just curious, the mixed use down the bottom right corner where there's a big X over it, I believe it's along 2A.
Yeah.
Why was that portion not included?
The Planning Commission felt like it wasn't connected enough to that Susie Wilson Road corridor. It was off closer to where the city is. we've already seen the development up here. It seemed logical that there could be further development up there.
Most of those parcels are also relatively small, and the ones that aren't are pretty constrained by Indian Brook, which runs along where the X actually is. Not to say that there couldn't be some development there, but probably not enough residential development that would benefit from this exemption.
Ethan? Yields
You,
to Andy?
you mentioned that there's an existing exemption already. Is there, how much overlap is there, or what's currently exempted? The what do they call them? Interim exemptions, or whatever they call them?
I can show you. Okay, so it is the blue area. So it is a loop up Route 15 going down Sand Hill Road, and then on to River Road, back in towards Essex Junction.
Okay, and you said that that's more or less based on the bus route.
Right. And also too, I should point out that over here in Essex West, that is also has that temporary extension.
So from it's hard to tell from, because the two maps are separate.
Yeah.
What overlaps there, or what?
Yeah. So
I might be able to pull that.
Okay.
You give me just a moment.
Sure.
And then I'll need to get on the meeting. Sorry, it'll take me a minute.
Okay.
But go ahead in the meantime.
Yeah, so I could try to zoom in. Oops, not that.
Essentially, I think the areas that will not continue from the interim exemptions are past the village center at the library, that part of town.
Right.
Beyond that would be currently exempt, but not going forward, all the way down out Jericho Road, Route 15, and down Sand Hill Road and back on 117. Although once you get to the city, they might do their own thing. They'll probably exempt their, we expect them to exempt the whole city.
Right.
So this area
and then
would
up
not
15.
be like up to here.
Okay, so Susie Wilson Road comes off. River Road comes off too.
Yes. Now Susie Wilson stays on, and it's interesting. This was temporary exemption based on the Jefferson commuter route. I think that isn't there anymore.
And the number 10 loop
And the
that
number
comes
10.
from Williston and loops around Sand Hill Road.
Right.
Yeah, but not the Susie Wilson Road area.
Okay. I'm just trying. I don't understand why they picked this for the interim, but that.
It was based on the transit routes specifically. Essex didn't have any other existing state planning designations, but
except for our village center, actually,
which now once
that
Act 181 was enacted, then you got your village center. So technically, that does maybe have the exemption. Hasn't been brought up to Act 250 or tested yet, but that transit exemption was kind of specific to Chittenden County as the major urban area of Vermont. And the intent there was to try to promote development along transit routes, which is an efficient way to develop. It helps support transit. It helps create compact development in general.
So the new ones follow along Center Road
from 289 over to the historic center.
So how is our new property up here sit?
In these interim exemptions, it is not included.
Right.
But within our within the recommendation here, that is the mixed use north area here.
Okay, so the portion that's outside of the sewer core is not included, but
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, this is the sewer core boundary.
All right. Thank you.
And one more clarification, since you brought that up about the town property. If the town chooses to move forward with any portion of housing on that property, those would be exempt.
Mhm.
And I don't believe that the commercial or non-residential portions would be exempt from Act 250, but it would help the housing portion move along a little faster.
Okay, so it's okay. So it's only for residential.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
Gotcha. So if somebody wanted to build a first floor commercial with residential above it, we'd still have to go through Act 250.
I think so. We're still waiting for some guidance from the Land Use Review Board on exactly how they'd handle situations like that. But I believe the language in statute says the housing portion of a mixed-use development.
Okay.
Ethan?
I actually didn't have a question about this until Shannon made a comment, but the sliver of mixed use there on what's that? Is that 2 or 50? That's 2.
2A.
2A Colchester Road.
Yeah. So, when was this map made?
Last summer, I think it was probably finalized.
Okay.
Yes, the study with CCRPC on the Essex West area, as well as there was another portion of Jericho Road that was studied for infill housing. That's where this map came from. But in terms of how long that mixed-use district has been there, it's way before my time.
Right, right. No, I knew the mixed use was there, but the map is missing commercial space and residential space. And there was a I don't know if it's an application or a review, but there was a hearing on building residential properties in that mixed-use area, just beyond Jason Leo Automotive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the holdup was regulation. So I don't understand why Jason Leo's and the single family homes aren't on the map like the neighborhoods are.
Are you saying it was north, like towards Colchester?
Right where, towards Essex Junction, right where that road comes out.
Yeah.
You could just pull up the zoning.
What's the name of that? Pinecrest?
Pinecrest.
Right where Pinecrest comes out. Jason Leo's is right there.
Yes.
And then there's a big empty lot, and then there's a new garage that was allowed to be constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes storage units, single family home.
Farm stand.
Farm stand's north, Colchester. That's on the map. Maybe that big square, maybe.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I remember that.
But I after he raised that concern, I'm like, this seems like a perfect opportunity to add that parcel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't remember how many years ago it was. Maybe you guys might have a little better memory than I do, but there was a proposed apartment building to go in there
Mm-hmm.
that faced some issues. I don't know all the details behind it. I just remember
Yeah, I'm
a
searching my
conversation
memory
I had
for it.
with
It's not
somebody
ringing a
about
bell
it
in
not
that
being
specific.
allowed.
Yeah, it's not ringing a bell for me in that specific area. Catherine might.
No, I mean, the most recent development that I remember over that area was off of Pinecrest Drive.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 36-unit subdivision.
Yeah.
Duplexes.
But
Yeah.
there's some duplexes, some
the
single
backside of the
family,
brook.
and that was approved, and they're under construction
Yeah.
right now.
And that's in the medium density residential district, not in
Right.
the mixed use.
This,
Right.
yeah, this hatched,
250. Yeah.
right.
It's probably one of the last.
So would it be
large
hard to
parcels
add to add that mixed use? Why we're there, and it's, you could, let's just say there was only 2 acres there, but you could potentially have the possibility for
So this
for
area,
20,
you're
20
talking about.
units
Yep.
minimum. I mean,
So it looks like this parcel is just over 5 acres. Quarter acre or a 3/4 acre.
It looks like the largest parcel is 5 acres, so it would already be exempt from Act 250 for housing development of up to 10 units. So I guess the opportunity there would be if there were more than 10 units on a parcel, on any of those parcels, that could qualify for the exemption.
And Darren is right that it is somewhat constrained by the back of the parcel. This is
yeah, but if you zoom into the map on the there's a gap right there. Oh, this is on the other side of the brook, where that development project's happening right now. How many units did you say they're putting in right there next to the brook?
I think it's 36.
36. So I feel like there's
So that parcel is too large to be exempt because it was
Right.
larger than 10 acres.
right.
But to your point, Ethan, I think
I don't know. I just feel like we're missing an opportunity to include.
Yeah, I don't feel like the planning commission would have much heartache if you wanted to add that. And I as far as your understanding goes, there's not a problem if the recommendation from the select board is different than the planning commission's.
none whatsoever, and it would create a little consistency between your zoning in terms of how you apply that locally with that Act 250 exemption, it would be essentially mixed use areas of Essex are exempt.
I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but I would recommend that we do that.
I think there's some logic to that.
I'm sorry.
There's some logic to that.
Oh,
yes.
thank you. Between my allergies and this like tickle in my throat, barely breathe, barely hear, barely see.
It's a miracle you're here tonight.
I mowed like 40 acres of hay today, so just imagine every time I got out, it was like.
I got more hay.
I know. I gotta
Yeah, we
get
gotta
in
connect on
touch
that.
with you. David Tucker's talking to me the other day.
So on that note, understanding that we haven't made any motions or voted on anything, just to be clear, I think the only change to what's in our packet is we would need to attach new maps
An updated
to the
map.
resolution, but the resolution would still be as it is in our packet. Is that your understanding as well?
That would work.
All right. Any other questions? Kendall?
If we're going to potentially add that, are there any other pieces anyplace else? I mean, we just found one like that. Should it be looked at again to see if there's an additional additions by staff?
There
Just
is
curious.
another mixed-use district, Darren was reminding me, on River Road. Let's see if I can.
We could approve the resolution and just have staff look at.
It goes from the city line close to, I can't remember the name of that street. Basically where JP's Diner is and some of the commercial spaces near there, and the Yankee Peddler shop. From the Yankee Peddler over to...
Like Pinewood, right? Like Pinewood Plaza? in that
Yes.
area?
Includes Pinewood Plaza.
Darren or Catherine, do you know if the planning commission looked at or gave consideration to the other mixed-use areas that were not included?
They did not want to consider the River Road area at all. They felt like there hadn't been enough study to expand it. So they felt comfortable with Susie Wilson Road and the ETC next areas. But we haven't really looked at what build out would be like in that area.
And forgive me if this was already stated, but do we have the opportunity to add to this status going forward?
Yes, I did not get to that. So this is our first opportunity to request Tier 1B status for all of our communities, is when CCRPC goes to the regional or to the Land Use Review Board to get our regional plan adopted. We're not exactly sure what the process would be to add in more areas to Tier 1B, but at minimum, it would be when we go to update our regional plan. We do expect to go in for an amendment within a couple of years, because we know there's going to be a few other changes to land use categories in other towns. So in a couple of years, we'll definitely have an opportunity. There may be ad hoc opportunities, depending on what the Land Use Review Board decides to do for a process around that.
Thanks.
But it's typically an 8-year cycle for updates.
Correct. Just
So
like a town plan.
It could be as long as 8 years.
Ethan?
I'm just thinking out loud here, but the way I would feel if I was in any of these areas is that if mixed use is allowed, mixed use is allowed, and if the town foresees that area not to be suitable for mixed use anymore, then the town would need to adjust its zoning boundaries. But to make the consideration that mixed use is to fall under this stipulation, I feel as if all mixed use should fall under the stipulation, as long as like here we're sewer core, right?
Yep.
So I don't think that would be the only constraint that I would see outside of that would be sewer core. But
Yeah, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think that the focus is meant to be just on mixed use, but rather where incentivizing housing and density is slated to occur. That is the philosophy of Tier 1B status and aligning to where we want to incentivize housing and density. And
Yes,
Darren
well
is
stated,
nodding,
Tracy.
so, okay.
It looks like a big open space behind apartment complexes already.
Yeah, and that's over 10 acres, so it would not be, this Tier 1B would not apply. It has to be 10 acres or fewer.
This
But I
could
do
be
know
subdivided
that
though,
portion
right?
of that parcel is relatively steep. We probably wouldn't see a lot of development there, but
We
along
have-
the road, if there were redevelopment of those.
So yeah,
sites.
this parcel, these 3 up front, or 4 up front. This is too large as well.
And is the zoning here, would there be any possibility of this ever being a subdivision in the future?
So, I mean, these are already developed with commercial buildings up front.
It looks like a driveway right away.
You know, in the back, you could, but again, there's steep slope. We have a pretty strict regulation about developing on slopes over 20%. Actually, there's an application before the DRB here where that's a problem, is the steep slope. It's a 2-unit proposal. You know, I think these businesses are doing well. In the future, they might turn to either mixed use or to residential. So there's always a possibility. You know, again, the Planning Commission was really looking at those 2 areas where they have recently done a study, as opposed to just, some towns have said, I think South Burlington, for example, said any area in town that is in the higher density, or the areas planned for growth, we want to be Tier 1B status. I don't know about all the other towns, that there's been more fine tuning like Essex is doing.
Yeah, a couple of towns have picked a couple of specific areas. Westford did just a very small area of their town center. Jericho opted into all eligible areas, so all 3 of their villages and a lot of area in between. Charlotte is on hold until they can have a public vote. Underhill declined entirely for now, but may look at it in the future. So it's a mixed bag, and I think it is perfectly appropriate to sort of think about what that means for your community and where it makes sense to put those exemptions. As far as the property owners are concerned, there's no real disadvantage to them. If they can take advantage of it, they can take advantage of it. Otherwise, they're kind of subject to the rules they've always been familiar with. And until those interim exemptions expire, they do have an opportunity until the regional plan is adopted, or January 1st, 2027. In terms of the town's pros and cons, this is an area you've allowed for significant development already. It hasn't happened yet, and it may or may not in the future, depending on the circumstances. The only thing you're really missing out on with Tier 1B exemption is that Act 250 review, and where that is different from your local review or adds more. So there are a couple of specific things that Act 250 might cover that the town might not. Since Essex has pretty good regulations on traffic, it really would just be about historic preservation and archaeological review, maybe some aesthetics, but that would only matter in an area that the town was concerned about aesthetics, which is not this part of town.
So these properties are already covered by the interim exemptions.
They are.
Already currently have the
They do.
same effect that Tier 1B would have. So, okay.
Right. Yep. Good point.
And that's in place until you said 2027.
January 1st, 2027, or when our regional plan is adopted, whichever comes first. We hope
Okay.
that'll be next June, 2026.
I feel better about that, knowing that it's already got the exemption on it. Thanks.
Sure. Ethan.
But if it's not on this map to be included in your plan, it will no longer have the exemption upon approval.
Correct. So
Okay.
once our plan is adopted, if you choose to exclude this area in your motion tonight, as of June 2026, hopefully when we have our plan adopted, their interim exemption would go away.
Okay.
And also, from my conversation with Act 250, it is an interim exemption, but it is also provisional. Like you need to speak with Act 250. They may or may not give you the exemption. It's kind of fuzzy. So
They're interpreting the interim exemptions as best they can, and given that they were a little broad and vague, they're trying to make their judgments on how that could work. They will also still probably have to interpret the permanent exemptions, but those are a little clearer in statute.
So understanding that, you know, the Planning Commission is not an advisory committee, but we still do appoint those members. And, you know, I think we still seek their input. Is there any, is this time bound at all?
We are trying to move our regional plan development and adoption process along, so we were hoping to have all of our municipalities opt in or not by July 1st, so that we can take that to our long range planning committee, which is our equivalent of a planning commission, and our board. If you want to have a little more time to revisit the specific areas that you're talking about tonight that the planning commission hadn't considered, we probably do have time to add those in before we go to the land use review board. So if that's sort of where your leaning is to get more input from them, I'd suggest you can adopt the resolution that they suggested to you, recommended to you tonight, and come back to CCRPC if you want to add in those other mixed use areas.
That's exactly where I was going. Thank
Great.
you. What is the, do we want to take public comment and then bring it back and have a, okay. Is there any public comment from members in the room or online? Bruce, come on up.
Yeah, my name's Bruce Post, 1 Cindy Lane. I appreciate those. I ran out of here without putting on my hearing aids, so I appreciate those of you who are speaking into your microphones so that I can hear you. All I want to do is, in my geezerhood, I become a Vermont environmental historian. I follow Act 250. I associate with a group, includes two former Act 250 district coordinators with about 50 years experience combined between them. I just want to say for the record, Act 250 has become a piñata that people like to beat, and it's not the problem it has been represented to being. That said, you can make your decision, but I want to stand up for Act 250. Many times delays have occurred because of state permitting processes and also local decisions, but it all gets blamed on Act 250. And that's all I want to say for here. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Going over online, Sharon Zukowski.
Hi there. Before I make a comment, I'd like to ask a question. The interim exemption, does that allow 50 homes on less than 10 acres without Act 250 review?
Yes, the interim exemption it's very similar to Tier 1B. Let me actually double check, because it might actually allow up to 75 units for the.
Oh, I should start building.
It is 50.
Sorry, it is 50 for the transit exemption.
My comment. I think Act 250 adds another layer of protection against bad local development decisions, and I just worry about that. And then I also think, the not in my backyard thing, I apologize that. I'm looking at my little neighborhood, which is like the dark brown. You can put that up if you want. I've got wetlands across the street from me. I've got a ravine behind me, basements flooding, and I'm just thinking we're going to start putting up 50 homes without any review. And, local municipal boards, I'm on it. We do make mistakes and bad decisions, and Act 250 sometimes is the only thing left to protect our community. And it doesn't just protect me, the whole community. So, I think we really have to think about changing this designation and taking away a layer of protection. Anyway, that's, so I hope you don't just casually pass this because someone's saying that like we're in a rush, we're hoping to get all the towns on board, and just really try to think about this, think about what's in those areas. I mean, even the light brown area, I think that's where Hannaford's and all that is. That's loaded with wetlands. We get sinkholes there all the time, and then we're just going to put in up to 50 units without an Act 250 review. I just think that's very dangerous. That's about all for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharon. Lorraine.
Thank you, Chair. I did attend the advisory meeting from the PC. It was interesting because 2 members voted no, which is highly unusual. And I was kind of surprised by the members that actually voted no, because I often disagree with their perspective. I also live in the brown area that is the commercial neighborhood, the high density or mixed use residential. And one of the issues that I see in terms of proposing this at this time is that our transportation corridors are maxed. I looked recently because we have a build going on next door that certainly would fit in, although they're over the acreage because they combined, but they would have fit in to be able to build more. And when I looked at the traffic counts that were in that site proposal, the traffic count was from 2018 and it was at 17,300. Certainly people who know Sweet Scoops understand that we probably need a new traffic count. I understand from Catherine that there's potentially one in the works at the regional level, but it's much needed because when I looked at the traffic crash query report, I pulled from, I can't remember if I CC'd you all on it or not, but when I pulled from the May 2022, because I figured COVID impacts weren't that bad till now, I was pretty surprised to see how many accidents happened in that little area. I pulled from Upper Maine up to past Hannaford's basically, and it's a really, really high accident count. And when I look at the impact fees, the impact of my taxes, it causes a lot of cost to our fire department, to our police services in terms of having to answer all those. We haven't really coordinated alleviating the traffic before we approve having a high density area. And the same was true at the bottom of the Susie Wilson Road corridor. I believe, if I remember right, that had the highest count in our whole town, actually. And I was rather concerned to see how many accidents are happening. It was a crazy amount of accidents. And that certainly isn't in consideration by the regional in terms of these identified areas. I, as a person who lives, many of you know where I live, next to Essex Discount Beverage. And some of you have seen my filter that I'm dealing with because of the traffic already. And because there's no setback, because this house was built long ago, before all the traffic happened. Act 250 is recourse for me. And when there was an assessment done of Act 250, I can't remember, Bruce might know, but we can certainly send along to you the report that came out, an assessment that really wasn't Act 250 that was at the heart of a lot of the issues. A lot of the issues were local ordinances and fights. Wasn't necessarily Act 250. I hope that you would consider voting no for now. Take a look at some of the other regional municipalities that said yes, see how it goes for them. And then it sounds like we can come back to this. But as someone who already suffers environmental impacts, if you take that away, and I see already what's happening, I'm in for it again for another how many years. So I really hope that you consider our little, we are a neighborhood, we are residential. Many of us don't have a lot of money. We're in a high impact area because we don't have a lot of money. Poor people tend to live on these routes. And I just feel like we haven't been given enough consideration in this process. And the fact that there was 2 people who voted no on the planning commission, again, highly unusual. So I would appreciate if you consider voting no on this. And not to mention the environmental impacts. When you look at where a lot of these steep slopes are and what's happening in terms of increasing our FEMA floodplains, I work in distribution. I have very big concerns about us cutting ourselves off down the road in terms of not being able to, we haven't dealt with like 117 yet and flooding issues and raising things up and reducing stormwater impacts. And the more we cut things down, our basement, by the way, floods. We finally, because we had to dig a big hole, cost us a lot of money, because the floodplain is raised so high now, right on Route 15, that we were consistently getting water in the basement. So I would like to see some things put into place before we say go ahead. Things like no basements in certain areas with high floodwaters. There's so many things we haven't considered, and just saying, yeah, let's take this extra layer off in terms of protecting people. Thanks.
Cheryl.
Hi, this is Cheryl Van Epps. I would like to ditto what Sharon Zukowski said and also what Lorraine has said. As far as wetlands and flooding, the house across the street from me, and I live at the top of a hill, so there shouldn't be any flooding at all. Their basement, their house was built where the water table, the groundwater level was so high that their basement was flooding. Over the 21 years that I've lived here, the 3 homeowners had to go through various measures to try to prevent that. It's a question of why building was allowed at this site. So I agree the protections are needed. Car crashes on Susie Wilson. I'm very much afraid to turn into Lowe's coming off of Route 15, taking that left at the traffic light. They need to do real traffic studies and get that. There's so much traffic, and it's a not well used road. We need more busing, public transportation in that area. There's none. I can't see how we're building more housing so more people will be using that street, and it's going to be even more dangerous. That's my opinion on that. Also, the last region that you pulled up on the map, off of 117, was from 57 River Road to like Yankee Peddler. I would ask that you look into the history of that property. They've done, they tried to develop, I think in 2005, that large property. It's on a steep slope, yes. And they found rare and endangered species in that area. So the landowner had to section off areas where they were the environment, so they wouldn't impinge on its growth area. I'd like you to take a look at that. So it's all, we are not looking at these factors when we look at that map. None of that's in our heads as we're seeing where should we develop or not. I think that's a problem. So I really do think that we need those Act 250 protections. Otherwise, we're going to be missing out. We're going to be clear cutting where bear food sources are, where deer. I walk that area and I see deer there almost every time I visit that area. Their food sources are there. Bat roosts. We have deer wintering areas, and I've learned that those are very rare to come across. Something like only 6% of our Vermont lands are deer wintering areas. They're being cut down for development. And again, those steep slopes. We need to really look at those factors when we consider where development takes place. So I I would plead that the select board vote no on this measure. Thank you.
I did. Come on. Come on up.
Thank you, Irene Renner again. I would ditto everything that I've heard from the public tonight. I had the privilege of serving in the Senate when this bill came through. I had a front row seat, watched the sausage being made, and I voted no enthusiastically. Thank you. Oh, I'm also concerned. What I did not know was that Jericho did accept some of these Tier 1B areas. So that means we're already going to be getting traffic from Jericho because most of that traffic from Jericho flows right through Essex. So just knowing that they're enthusiastic about changing zoning to make this easier for them concerns me. And so I think we need to be reactionary and even more measured in our approach as to what we allow to be built along Route 15 and some of these corridors where that Jericho traffic will be coming through. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. I don't see any other hands online. I don't see hands up in the room, so I'll bring it back to the board. Sounds like we can either have a further conversation, we can move forward, or we can, well, have a further conversation, take no action, have a further conversation with either the Planning Commission, gather more information, and it sounds like there's not a ticking clock, although the initial thought was, July.
Yes, the ticking clock is just for the first opportunity to get in while we do our regional plan approval. There will be future opportunities, but potentially years down the line.
So our next meeting is July 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too late? Or is it?
It might be too late for this first round, this first go at it.
Ethan.
So I would just say that we take out all the mixed use, and then that would eliminate the town's property and the two properties that abut the town's property. And my reasoning for that would be a lot of the comments we heard tonight was about protecting habitats and not cutting down trees. I think it's equally as important to protect prime agricultural soil in the town of Essex, and I don't think it should be developed on. But if we gotta approve something tonight, I would recommend that we remove all of the mixed use. So mixed use north would be the one I would ask to be removed, as well as south, and then the two from the Essex West.
So you wanted,
I'd like to remove all mixed use.
but that would leave the Route 15 corridor and the historic center or the village center?
Yep, you would have exactly historic center and the neighborhood commercials. So you'd have your two 15 and 15 and 128 intersection.
So those are the two you would want to retain Act 250 exemption?
Yeah, there's no prime agricultural land there, and there's no trees really to be cut other than what would be behind I wouldn't say behind, it'd be on the side of the price chopper, I believe, is the only open land there for development. And I think one of the reasons that that's never been developed is because of Act 250. If I'm wrong about that, it's mostly wetlands in there, and it's probably not going to get developed anyway. So
yeah.
I just want to clear up potential confusion. So the mixed use north and mixed use south are different than the mixed use zoning district. These are new districts that were proposed as a part of the ETC next plan. So their zoning is, they're not actually our new zoning districts yet. It's proposed in our town plan, and it was from the ETC next plan. But so the mixed districts that we saw in like Essex West and then down on River Road are very different districts. as far as their density, far as the planning that's gone into it as well, and what kind of growth and development we want to see.
Right. But the town gave a property owner the potential for 274 EUs next to 80 Upper Main Street, pending using their land for a driveway to the municipal complex. So you know that you're going to be building high density residential in there, and you want to have commercial space in there. So you know that it's going to be mixed use. It's not going to be something else. We can make it conservation and recreation. That would be great. But that's not that's not what we're going for. So
Right,
let's call it mixed use and treat it as mixed use across the board and be transparent, and would be my suggestion.
And Ethan, just one other point of clarification. So in the Susie Wilson, Essex West area, you're saying those mixed-use districts would come out, but the retail business
Would stay.
along Susie Wilson and at Gardenside would stay. Just
Correct.
that's what you're suggesting. Clarifying.
Either include it all or remove it all. Otherwise, you're subject to benefiting yourself for property owned by the town in a land use change. And penalizing others in the same land use. Mixed use is mixed use, right?
I'm a little curious in 15, the brown area, I'll call it. The statement that there's not development that will occur. There is development that's happening there.
But the developable lot was already before our development. It was actually the planning commission at the time that made that decision to allow the development there. There's no other property there currently right now that has any. They're all residential is what I'm getting at. Next to that property that is doing the large scale apartment complex. I don't know what the right word is.
I do know that I don't have the zoning map up, but back in this area, there has been discussion with property owners to allow development back there that would be of a larger scale, walkable type of development for just residential.
But that could only happen pending a subdivision that hasn't happened yet.
I don't know off the top of my head the acreage. I think there are a couple different parcels back there right now. So yeah, Darren's pulling up one that's 4.37 acres. So that's this right about here.
There is certainly development.
There's no
potential in
access to that property. There's no access to that property. You'd have to build the town would have to commit to building a road. I mean, somebody would have to commit to building a road.
There is a right of way. The developer would also build any access that would be required under the town's zoning regulations.
There's
I
there's
think
a lot of history with all that area.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think what's important to consider for this is to figure out where the town wants to grow, where it wants to promote growth, and where it wants to say we've already planned and can adequately handle growth of this medium scale within our local zoning regulations, and then whether Act 250 provides any additional value to the community in terms of the specific elements that the town doesn't cover that Act 250 would, or the opportunity to look at those issues again under a state and regional perspective of review. You've had comments tonight from the public about folks appreciating that additional review, and I know there's part of the impetus behind Act 181 was acknowledging that sometimes that is helpful, sometimes it can also get in the way of housing development. I won't go into all the detail of pro or con, but that was the opportunity presented to municipalities and to regions is if you feel that Act 250 isn't necessarily providing that value for those specific types of projects in these very specific areas, you have the opportunity to say, let's forego that because it's under control in those areas.
Andy.
I'm in favor of supporting the planning commission's recommendation, considering that they have all of the knowledge of what other controls are in place behind this, and I don't. I don't feel comfortable changing the recommendation given the limited knowledge I have about all the things around it. And I assume that they've looked at all of that because that's their charter, and I'm in favor of supporting it as proposed.
Okay. Other board comments, questions?
I just think it's very unusual that it's not all for one or none for one. To pick one area, say yes, and the same area is owned the same way, say no by a board. That's setting a precedence. Should be one or the other. And I don't have the knowledge for this either, but just from the comments we've had and stuff, I don't think I'm gonna vote for it. Need more information.
Shannon, do you feel like you have enough information? Do you have additional thoughts, questions?
I mean, I appreciate all the information our guests have brought to us, as well as the board members and members of the public. I too question, as we focus a lot of this conversation on why is this mixed use not associated with it versus this one? What about this? What about that? Whether you're in the sewer core, different things. I would like to not vote on this tonight personally and get more information.
Andy?
I would, I guess, add the additional comment that I would be happy to approve it as is tonight, the provision that we asked the planning commission to look at those other mixed use areas to come back with an explanation for why they would not be included.
So, Ethan?
And then they can't be added for 8 years, just so you know.
Yeah, no, I'm aware
Okay.
of that.
I just wanted to put that in there.
Probably 2 years, at most 8 years.
Plan for 8, hope for 2.
Yep.
So Ethan?
I was just gonna say I'll make the motion if we're gonna bring it to a vote.
Yeah.
But
I was just gonna say, I'm hearing people want to have more discussion and gather more information. So I think that is where we're at.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is this our purview to, do we have right, there's the whole separation of statutory, who does what? Are we just supposed to approve what's been recommended, or is it in our purview to modify what's been recommended by our planning commission?
My understanding is that you can, the planning commission provides recommendations to you, whether it's the zoning regulations, the town plan, and then you take action on that. Correct me, it's the same different, this is the same similar type of process to zoning regs, town plan, any other recommendation that comes from the planning commission to the select board.
Yes. And the Land Use Review Board has specifically said in their guidance that they want legislative body approval for Tier 1B requests. They will be asking CCRPC for that when we go to put this before them.
So, the housing targets, did we approve those? Or did we just made aware of them?
You were made aware of them. We're not asking for formal action on either the housing targets or the future land use map. We would love to hear support for that if you're interested, or concerns if you have them, or any additional feedback. That'll be helpful to us as we go through our regional plan adoption process, but there's no formal statutory or process requirement that you act on those.
Okay, so but nobody's yet said whether or not there'll be any downside to not meeting the housing targets.
What I can say about that is that the housing targets are put out to put a number on something that's already in regional and municipal plans, this housing element saying how are we going to meet our housing needs and reach those goals. And you are required to put into your municipal plan at the next time you update it the housing targets themselves, as well as any actions needed to help reach those targets on the municipal side and to help leverage public-private investment in housing. You don't necessarily get penalized for not meeting those targets as long as you've put those actions in your plan and tried to implement them. The only review on that is our regional review of your municipal plan and whether you've put those actions in and made progress on those actions.
Okay, so we're not going to update our town plan until 2032.
Yep, if you amend it in between now and then, we'd ask you just to put the housing targets in, but at most it would be your 8-year expiration after the 2024 adoption, so you don't need to worry about that until then.
Okay, do we have concern about having a commission actually, or planning commission, or a commission that we're not listening to? I mean, we've been having discussions about interactions with committees and commissions, and I'll stop. You just looked at your watch. It's enough. Okay.
Yeah, no,
I'm not
I'm
gonna
just
convince you yet, so.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, as chair, it's one of my roles to make sure that we building consensus and forward momentum, and I'm not hearing it. And if there is a question as far as more information, more conversation and communication with those bodies, I think that that's the direction that we should be taking, and I didn't hear anybody saying otherwise. So that's my takeaway from where we're at right now.
Greg's gonna say that.
Greg.
If I can just ask a timing question of Darren. As you heard, the select board's next meeting is not until July 17th. I believe the planning commission would meet again before then, but I'm not positive. Is it worth trying to get this before the planning commission to get back to the select board on July 14th, or is that just really past the deadline for the regional planning commission?
I'll check with our regional plan team and see what our timing looks like, but just so to lay it out, our long-range planning committee will meet on July 1st and July 8th to review all of the municipal recommendations for the maps, the housing targets, and Tier 1B recommendations, and they will then forward that to our board for review in between July and September. We've got a fairly drawn-out process to get our plan adopted in terms of public input and public hearings, and then going to the state land use review board. So I can't promise anything. I will say there's a chance, but I'll leave it at that.
And as an additional note, I am on the long range planning committee for CCRPC, so I can convey that at the July 1st meeting.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Tracy.
The Planning Commission does meet on July 10th.
Sorry, can we clarify the question we want to ask them so we make sure we get feedback we're looking for? Is the mixed use question, is that what we're looking for?
I'd like to understand that further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I just want to make sure that we have what we need, potentially.
Ethan, you had a lot of questions. Is there anything else you need to clarify?
I just want to know why one is allowed and the other isn't. And I think you know that this whole timeline thing. I'm really sorry that this got brought to us the meeting before it needed to be approved. But you're talking about totally different types of lands under the same name use. Specifically, the mixed use is for commercial and residential to be on the same parcel, right, by the same property owner. That's the point of mixed use, right? One property owner will have commercial and residential multi-use building. That's where my understanding of it is.
It's for the actual mixed use district. It's unclear to me on what that means. It seems to me that it can be you have a completely residential parcel and next to it could be a completely commercial, or you could have them both.
Right.
But it's not you don't have to have a mixed use development.
It's permissive to either essentially business district or medium density residential, or any mix thereof.
I think one of the overall goals of mixed use is to be able to work, shop, live all within the same general area, reducing reliance on the need for cars, increasing walkability, increasing multimodal transportation. So I think it's deeper than just what can go there. It ties into many more goals. Okay, so I heard sort of how and why one area, not others. Are there any other questions that we would like to follow up on? Ethan?
I just got a comment to the other board members, but you know, when we redid the zoning regulations, there was some language in there about electric fences, right? Something simple, and it was overlooked. And the select board made a change and came to a consensus and approved it, and it didn't go back.
You can't hear me.
I'm good. Move on.
Can we follow up a letter like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to be rushed, so I think that this should have been presented to us a month ago, and we could have had 4 discussions on it. So now we're here, and there's no consensus, so that we get an answer and we get a decision. Great. If we don't, I think the town property should be removed from the map and approve the rest of it.
So the general questions were how, why, mixed use, why one, not the other. I will ask that if board members do have other specific questions that they would like answered regarding this item, to email them to Greg and Karen. We don't need everything on the table right here, right now. But as a follow-up, go ahead, do that. And Darren and Catherine, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
It's important discussion, so thanks for taking the time to do it. We'll be in touch, and again, sorry to have the time limits on the process. We're trying to keep everything moving so all of our communities can obtain the benefits that we're trying to get for everyone. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again. At this point, that brings us to our move from the consent agenda, consider approval of additional wastewater allocation for 56 Tanglewood.
We gotta go. Shit.
Do we have, who does the board want to hear from on this? Go ahead.
I asked that it be moved from consent, so I'd like to speak.
Sure.
Not gonna like this, maybe, but from what I've heard, my understanding is that it's the land use covenants that are the problem, that say that land can't be subdivided, and that it's the HOA's responsibility to enforce that, not the town. Is this true? Is it true? Yeah, that's what I thought, because I wanted to have chickens.
I'm sorry.
In my neighborhood, and we have covenants that say no livestock. And so I went and talked to Sharon about it, and she said, you can go ahead and put them on there, but you'll get sued by your HOA. The town has no, because it's allowed in regulations or in statute or in ordinances for me to have chickens. I can do it from the town's perspective, but the HOA can sue me to stop doing it. So it's my understanding that that's what I see here is it's not, if the planning commission or the DRB has made a decision and it's objected to, it's the environmental court it needs to go to from that standpoint. And if it's something that's in the covenants, it's the HOA's responsibility to enforce, not the town's. That's the way I understand it.
And I'm in the same situation. I have a covenant on my property that I can't subdivide, but if I wanted to, the town would say sure. But my neighbors that I am part of that covenant with may take issue. Likely would take issue. But that's between me and them, not me and the town.
Right. It's my understanding.
And is that
That is my understanding as well.
other discussion?
My question is, do they have an active valid permit from the DRB for it? Because you should probably have a permit before you get allocation.
I
Kinda like
believe,
the cart.
not necessarily. I believe that they did receive the DRB approval last week. I do not know if a permit has been issued yet. Typically, there's I think a 2-week appeal period. I'm not totally sure on the timelines. A lot of times when projects do move through, they try to get the different approvals lined up so that when the final approval comes from the DRB, they're ready to move forward. So that may include state permits, it may include town permits, it may include sewer allocation. Depending on the complexity of the project, stuff is often moving at multiple steps at once.
If we approve the allocation, would that get rescinded if their permit gets rescinded? Just curious,
That is a good question.
because they're two separate things. So that's my only question.
I mean, I think we could also make any motion contingent upon final approval by.
I would believe so. I'm just trying to check and see if the sewer
So-
allocation permit specifies.
So there is a condition in the recommended motion that they're required to purchase the allocation prior to the issuance of a building permit. So if no, I don't know, right? There's a chicken and egg thing here, right?
Ethan?
I've asked some questions not around this property, but in other properties in the town, and from my best understanding, and I could be wrong, but from my best understanding is anybody can get sewer allocation for any property inside the sewer core without any plan to develop the building, the lot. And it's up to the town to approve that or deny that. And then if you go and like there's a lot down on River Road that's was thought to be the state of Vermont's idea of where they wanted to build, and it's got a sewer allocation, but it hasn't been executed because the town has allotted them so much sewer capacity, but they haven't filed a development review to build yet, so they haven't paid for the sewer allocation until they complete that process. My understanding is the select board just allocates the allotment, but there's many properties that are allotted sewer allocation now that haven't actually built or paid the fee, kind of like this proposal is asking, the way I understand it. I have a map that reflects that.
Yeah, and I think the, aside from the DRB conversation review, whether it fits in, whether it doesn't, just because we approve sewer allocation doesn't mean that that's what's gonna get built. It doesn't mean that that's not us giving approval for the site plan and everything leading up to that.
I've got to push back on that. I mean, if you're giving someone approval for, an additional use in the sewer, I think you're basically saying you're going to someday use that. So and they could use that as they're saying, like, hey, well, one body of government said we're good to have, sewage uses up to 200 gallons a day. That's basically saying, yes, this is fine. We expect this to go forward either in the future or like in the immediate future.
But what is the select board's role in, number one, development review, and number two, in enforcement of covenants that exist outside of our purview? I think I just answered my own question.
I think, yeah.
I'm just looking at the permit. There's a check mark for conditions of approval, if relevant, and there's options for renewal dates. Unfortunately, I don't know what that would entail at this point. It's something I'd have to look into after this meeting.
So, Ethan?
I was just gonna say I got a motion unless we were gonna go to public comment, but
Well, we took it out of consent, so is there any public comment on this item?
I'll explain to you why Betsy and I are here. We have filed for a reconsideration of the DRB decision. There is precedent for that. It happened, I think, in 2005 or 2006, when this subdivision was approved by the Planning Commission. And then all of a sudden there was a motion to reconsider. They reconsidered and then defeated their rescinded their approval. What I want to try to briefly explain to you today, what was at play when the DRB was considering this. The main thing was waiving the second access rule. We have a zoning ordinance that says after 50 houses you have a second access, and I think we're approaching 200 in that area now, but that was basically it, to waive the second access. There was a subsidiary concern about what could happen to that lot that was being proposed, a 1 acre lot split off from the larger 4 acre lot by the that owned by the applicant. The DRB was concerned that the staff report was not complete. Certain things were left out. One of the things that was part of the discussion was they were concerned that it was possible to convert that land because of the new state laws on housing into more than one housing unit. So the arrangement was proposed that the deed would say only a single family home on that lot. But if you look at Act 47, the Home Act, a deed would not override the legislature's authorizing, if you're on public water and sewer and lots of certain size, you could put up perhaps 4 units on 1 acre. It could be a fourplex, it could be 4 units. I've even seen drills where each of those units could put in an ADU, which is something you can do by right. So there was a discussion with Sharon Kelly, the zoning administrator. And one of the things she said is that the lot is approved for a single-family structure. I've taken notes from the meeting, not for the subdivision or dwelling units, including accessory dwellings, shall occur on either parcel, both the one proposed for the simple parcel and the larger lot owned by the present owner. And off-camera, a comment was made by one of the DRB members, and that would be in the deed. And Ms. Kelly said, and that would be in the deed. It would be a condition of your approval, and the deed would capture that. So I'm questioning whether a deed can even do that in the present legal environment. Ian, I don't remember his last name, chair, said, so that would limit that. And then Dustin Brousseau asked, does that truly limit it when the state says you can have an accessory apartment? And Sharon Kelly said, this particular parcel, the bylaws don't allow for an accessory dwelling unit. Again, Owen was an attorney. Owen Jenkins was the attorney who developed the property. And we went back on. I said, what bylaws? Sharon Kelly said, zoning regulations. U.B. Brown, is it? Asked, so you're saying it's written in the deeds currently? And Sharon Kelly said, I didn't look at the deeds, but it is my understanding it is that. Off camera, there couldn't be accessory units, SK. Sharon Kelly said there couldn't be no mother-in-law apartments, U.B. Brown asked, say, and whatever, and she said, right. And then I asked questions about what could happen under existing state law regarding the development of that land, even if you have it in a deed. And Sharon then mentioned that the bylaws forbid this. So we went into the records, town public land records, and found the bylaws. And they allow for in-law apartments. They allow for accessory units, but only those that are non-habitable and things like this. So
we're not here to talk about the bylaws. We're not here to talk about, we're here to talk about the sewer allocation of 200 gallons per
And
day,
my,
which would be equivalent to one single family home.
yes.
So if that expanded past that part.
Yeah, my fear was that by approving that, you're giving your imprimatur what the DRB approved, and we filed for a reconsideration because we feel they didn't have the proper information and there were misrepresentations made. That's all.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Bruce, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Is there any other, yes, I see Lorraine.
Yeah, so if there's an appeal process in place right now, because one of the questions on approving that parcel was the that there was only one outlet and there was about 180 homes in there. And so when we looked back at the ICC recommendations, which our town follows those rules, international codes, it said that the recommendation for one outlet was 30 homes at most, and beyond that 30 homes, if you're going to build in there, they should have sprinkler systems. So if they're appealing that, I'm concerned that if you approve tonight, would it really be okay if there's an appeal process in place in the first place? So why allocate something when there's an appeal first, and why not wait until after that?
To be clear, it's not an appeal, it's a request for the DRB to reconsider their.
Yes.
Right, sorry.
And
Yeah.
I've provided 5 points in that regard and some of them contradict what the zoning administrator said. Also the staff report said the opening to Birchwood was 60 feet and it's 40 feet. And so I understood we had to present new information, and this is what we're trying to do with these records. And I don't know what they'll do, but as I said, there's precedent for it, and I would like to correct the record, quite frankly, and have the committee understand that there are implications for this decision as to whether they could even limit it to a single-family home.
So
How many more people will we have coming into living there?
can you just state your name for the record?
Betsy Dunn.
Thank you.
And, but how many people will be there? And I know that everyone is like, the trees. Well, it could be any kind of natural disaster that comes along, and we've had them. And if you can't get, there's no outlet. The choke point is at the.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yeah. and
We're here to talk about sewer
also
allotments.
agree. We're not talking
Okay.
about ingress, egress.
Okay.
We're here to talk about the sewer allocation.
Okay. Reason to avoid the sewer allocation then is because we don't know if it's even going to go through, if there's a reconsideration. That's the answer to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So bringing this back to the board.
I think we have one more.
Yep, went forward.
I'm sorry, but I have to come up for. So Jeff Kirshner again. I agree with everything that you guys are saying right here, is that the point of this right here is to get sewer allocation. That's what we're here for. It's part of the process that we need to do that based on your sewer ordinance. But I do, if you'll give me just 1 second, I have to just say to you to put yourselves at ease, even though I don't think it's really your purview for this. Should anything else want to happen on that lot, what we're here for tonight is 1 EU, 200 gallons a day for one single family residence. Should anything else want to happen, an ADU, anything, they need sewer allocation. And they got to come right back here to get that. And so you, in a way, the DRB has a way to limit that. They could deny it. You have a way to limit that. They need sewer allocation. But that's something in the future here. Who knows? We shouldn't be talking about that right now, to use your power to limit something that meets the rules. We're just asking for 1 EU. You're right. I don't believe that we actually have to have a approved development to ask for that 1 EU. I do this for a living. We often request different reviews at the same time because it saves a lot of time. We started this process with the McClellans in March for a DRB hearing. We didn't get on in April for I'm not 100% clear why. Then we got to May. We had technical difficulties. We're another month. Now we're in June. So time is something that's very important to applicants. And so we run those concurrent together, and that's allowed. Right now we waited, because it's one of my things, I wait till local approval. We got it. As soon as I do that, I thought I had wastewater allocation, but I needed to come to you to do that. So we're right away doing it. And then we've concurrently filed for a state permit. I can't file for that until I get the local approval. So you're right, we do them all the time, but I don't think any of that matters for you and what we're here for tonight. We're just asking for 1 EU per your sewer ordinance. And you're the right board to do it. Doesn't matter what the DRB has done. You're the board that we have to ask for that.
Ethan.
I move that the select board approve the additional allocation in the amount of 200 gallons per day, 1 EU, for a future single-family home on the newly created lot at 56 Tanglewood Drive with the following condition. 1. The applicant will be required to purchase the approved sewer and water allocation prior to the issuance of a building permit.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Andy. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. With that approval, do we have anything to talk about in open session on the executive session items? We did already talk about Green Mountain Transit. Do we have anything on the others?
Yes.
Yes, Andy, sorry.
Due to the possibility of a appearance of a conflict of interest, I will recuse myself from discussions about library trustee appointees and also the election thereof.
Duly noted. Do you have anything else for?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing nothing else other than executive, we'll jump to the reading file. I would like to say thank you to Mukesh on the Energy Committee and also David Harrington on the Police Community Advisory Board for their service.
Stole my comment.
Sorry. We'll also point to the draft list of select board work items for review and personal reflection as we move toward actually adopting those at a future date. Anything else for the reading file?
Yes, thank you for including the thank you notes from all of the human service organizations. I always enjoy reading those, and I know many of those people, and it's great to see them happy.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'll say kudos to the Public Works Department for their Maple Street Gravity project and hopping on the future fixes. That's a good thing.
Indeed. Indeed. If there's nothing else for reading file, I will entertain executive session motions.
I got the police ones here. I move that the select board make the specific finding that the general public knowledge of contracts would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss contracts pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1A to include the town manager and deputy town manager and police chief.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Andy.
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the proposed public official appointment in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 and to include, says the assistant to the manager.
Deputy manager will work, please.
The manager and the deputy manager, yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Shannon. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
Are we good with the tree farm?
We should have a real estate discussion if you could do that executive.
Okay. I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A2 and to include the town manager and deputy town manager.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Shannon. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. We are now in executive session. Thanks, folks, for joining. Shannon, is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are out of executive session.
Logan, we're good? Thank you. Oh, no, we're, yeah, we're about to, they're about to make some motions.
We're about to do stuff. Okay, we are back from executive session. Shannon, I believe you have
I have a big motion for you, Madam Chair. I motion to appoint Aaron DeVries, Sarah Salentino, and Dwayne Miller Barlow to a 3-year term on the Conservation and Trails Committee, as well as Ken Signorello to fill the 2-year term available that is presently vacant on the Conservation and Trails Committee. I also motion to appoint Irene Renner to a 3-year term on the Economic Development Commission. I motion to appoint Rod Williams to a 1-year term on the Energy Committee, and Mr. William Dodge to a 3-year term on the Energy Committee. And for the Essex Free Library Board of Trustees, we will come to in a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Bye, Andy.
Oh.
Yes, Shannon.
Now that Andy has recused himself, I motion to appoint Mallory Langevin, Ellen Knowles, and Janet Watt to each serving a 3-year term on the Essex Free Library Board of Trustees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0-1 with Andy abstaining. Andy!
Andy, come back.
Ethan.
Are we good? Do we have more?
GMT.
Oh, yeah. There's no action.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Well,
Second.
Okay, motions to adjourn are non-debatable.
Do we? Oh, yeah, okay.
So,
Past 11:30 anyway.
so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. We're now adjourned.